Did.
Yeah, I never.
I'm gonna drink this and I probably will again.
I was
Good evening again. We call this meeting to order. It's a regular meeting of the City Council of Fort Walton Beach on Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. If you have a cell phone, if you'd please put it on vibrate or turn it off, that would be most appreciated. And then if you'll stand with me, please, for a short invocation, and then followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. May we bow our heads. Thank you for the freedom we all enjoy to gather in open forum to discuss, debate, and decide the pathway the city of Fort Walton Beach will take in the days, months, and years ahead. Thank you for our many, many blessings. We pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Done it 3 times today.
And with that, council, may we get an approval of the agenda? Oh, wait a minute. We're gonna make a small change to the agenda. We're gonna add item 11.3 in the action discussion section to talk about code enforcement and take action on the presentation we heard earlier this evening. So with that addition,
Mr. Mayor, I promise
Yes, sir.
one day I'm going to remember this, but if I want something to come out of the consent agenda, do I do it now or at item 5?
I think it needs to come out now.
Okay, I would like to pull 5.3 aside just for separate discussion.
All right, we'll pull 5.3 from the consent agenda, and we can add it for 11.4.
Thank you.
Mayor, I move we approve the agenda with 11.3 being action items on code enforcement and 11.4 being the previous item number 5.3.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Meade, second by Councilman Jeter to approve the consent agenda with items 5.1 and 5.2 being on that agenda. Any comment? Council, please vote. Does pass 6-0. Thank you, Council. And that does take us to the consent agenda, item 5.1, 5.2. We voted to approve the agenda. Now we're voting to approve the consent agenda. Yeah. I need a motion for that as well.
Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Been moved by Councilman Allegretto and second by Councilman Jeter to approve the consent agenda, which consists of item 5.1 and item 5.2. Further comment? Council, please vote. That also passes 6-0. Thank you, Council. And that'll bring us to item number 6, Mayor Council comments, and we will start with Councilman Schmidt. And he's not here, so we'll start with Councilman Smith.
Nothing from me, Mayor.
All right, Mr. Walker.
Because I had it here, I wasn't sure how it was going to go. So, Mr. Mayor, one request of you last meeting, you and I spoke about the gentleman I had asked on the previous meeting to appear here to address some questions I had regarding how the request for funding, how that, I think the word was, help. It was whispered in your ear, and I would like, I appreciate you offering to have him call me, but I would like for him to appear here. So, because I think I know that it is around the mound is one of our biggest. It is our biggest issue facing us right now. So I'm just really hung up on making sure I understand how it all works together, and I know that with him appearing here, it'll help me understand how it all works. So if you could,
I will do that, sir, but he has reached out to you. Has he not?
by a phone call,
Yes.
and that's not public. I do want the questioning to be public, and his
Certainly.
answers and responses to be public, so I appreciate that.
Certainly can do that. All
And then Jeff, just real quick, and we did move it to 11.4, but maybe so that as we're going through the meeting, we can think about it a little bit too. Can you give us a quick update on the lease at the park there by the library? 2 parts, I guess, on the City of Fort Walton Beach Facebook handle or Facebook, entity, there was a post there that was made, and I saw it, and then I read the thread, and there was a mention about that we're working on a lease, and I was like, no, I think we've already done that back then. And so it brought up a series of questions, and one, I don't know, I know that we approved to lease the property at the, y'all did, I abstained on that one, but we approved it to lease it for an amount, but I don't know that a lease has ever been brought back to us to look at. And so, one, who's doing the Facebook posting now that Makiko's gone?
Yeah, well, Devin handles it with the city, from the city of Fort Long Beach Facebook page.
Okay.
Well, just to give you an update on that, I spoke with the Gibson family
Okay.
over the last 2 or 3 weeks, probably 100 times.
Sure.
The issue was the city can provide insurance up to the sovereign immunity amount, which is $300,000. Their side wanted more insurance. So what we've kind of worked back and forth is they can increase their insurance policy, and the city can pay the additional premium, which it sounds like it may be around $100 or something. So we're kind of, I spoke with her today. We've drafted the agreement. They have it in hand, and we'll get an answer back to us this week.
Were there any other considerations or concerns expressed by them about the lease that was presented to them at that time, other than the sovereign immunity?
Mainly it was insurance, and it was really tied to the special events. They were really concerned about possible injuries or with big special events. So we've in the wording in the lease document that we wouldn't schedule any special events in that park. Would be an open green space on the back of the library, obviously, and you all know where the property is, but it would be trees, green space, some benches, picnic tables, kind of a passive park, which is probably about 75% of our parks in the city are passive parks.
Right, because I remember when it came before us, for consideration and all, I really liked the design, the shades that were over it. I think there were some pads, and might have been a stage up against the wall. I don't remember. So, trying to get an understanding of what would be happening there, and it sounds as though maybe the things have changed on what maybe our plans were and what now is going to be allowed. If their concerns were about special events, does the lease, by standard, a practice, does the lease come back to us for approval?
It will.
So it's not approved at this time?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right.
And just to follow up on that, the stage, we will remove the stage from the drawing, but it'll still be a sidewalk, pavers to the library, shade trees, benches, picnic tables, just a real nice shaded passive park.
Perfect. Thank you.
But that will come back at the first meeting in August.
Thank you.
That it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Allegretto?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to follow up with you, Mr. Peters, all the work that's going on at Ferry Park right now, and I want to first say thank you for your personal involvement in the lighting situation. You've been really great in following up. We requested more lighting out there. It's a priority of the council. It's a concern of the citizens, and just the initial action that you've taken is great, and I know that there's more to come, so thank you for that. Secondarily, we got the pickleball courts going in. We have the fitness center, the fitness pad, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Fitness area, court going in over there. And I know that when we had initially done that and made that motion, I made that motion and added additional money to put a cover over top of it. My goal with that was, that we'd have some sort of shade so that people, during these hot months in the state of Florida want to go out there and work out and get fit. They can do that without being blazed by the sun or grab a metal bar and not, scorch their hands. And also, if it's raining or, inclement weather, that they'd be able to do that. I know that I made a motion with the number of $10,000, and I don't know, obviously, because I don't price structures for city governments very often. Maybe that money was not sufficient. If that is the case, I would like an opportunity to make another motion to amend that amount of money and give you the discretion that you need to get that done. Because I don't want something that I set up here just thinking that, hey, I'm providing this great extra thing to it, and now we're going to end up holding up the whole project. So During my comments here, I'd like to make the motion that we amend that amount of money for the fitness structure there at Ferry Park from $10,000 up to what the city manager is allowed to spend per the statute in the city code.
All right. I have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Mead. All right. It's been moved by Councilman Allegretto, seconded by Councilman Reed to amend the spending limit for the city manager on the
I would just
cover.
suggest, Mayor,
Sure.
they allow public comment before vote, just because this was an unagenda motion, just to make sure.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. All right. To clarify the motion, it's to amend the, allow the city manager to spend up to his spending limit on that cover for the recreation, not the playground, or the fitness area at Ferry Park. Anyone in the public wish to comment on that? All right, seeing none. Mr. Allegretto for the comment?
No, sir.
Mr. Mead for the comment? Council, please vote.
In their discussion, in between those two?
If you want to have a discussion.
Oh, okay, well, I was watching, yeah, I know, I'm learning, the courtesy is back to the motioner, seconder, and then back to us, if I understand, so. So we're talking the shade over it, is that what we're talking about? And Jeff, your spending limit is 50,000?
And it would be coming from half cent sales tax.
Right, so do we have any idea of what that number is for that shade? You've done a couple, I think.
Yeah, we started actually trying to get some prices when we were getting the concrete lined up. And just as a side note, Daniel Payne's got his crews with the lighting and the concrete and everything. Those guys are really getting after it. So I'd like to give those guys a shout out to. Those guys are the ones getting it done. But we started pricing them. The fitness court's about 40 by 40. And getting a structure over that whole thing is more than $10,000. We've got some prices in about the 40, 42, 43. And that would cover the whole court. Put it in the shade and you know, prevent some of the water and stuff getting on. So that's, we've got 3 or 4 designs and quotes and stuff, so we haven't, that's one yet, we're just in the process of looking.
Will this, so with that motion, if I understand it right, we'd just be authorizing, it wouldn't come back to us to review or anything, it would just happen?
Unless it would exceed his spending.
The 50,000. And it's not a material, it's not canvas, is it?
There's a combination, you can get some that are, like what's over the batting cage over there, you can get some that are the mesh vinyl. We found some where a lot of the actual materials are about 25 to 30, and installations, 15 to 20,000. You put in footers, and it's got a whole 150 mile an hour wind load, so there's a lot of work involved in that with engineering plans and stuff to put something safe at the top of it. So that's where the expenses come in.
So was the court itself, how much was it? I'm trying to remember. I mean, I remember seeing the design, it looks really nice.
Yeah, like 135, and we got a $60,000 grant.
It's 130, we got a $30,000 grant.
It was how much, I'm sorry?
130.
And we got a $30,000?
It was 130 after the $30,000 grant.
So it was 160, we got 30, so 130. And then during that meeting, we did have discussion about cover, and
Correct.
was it just missing in the motion back then that it would not include it, or we'd look for it later? I can't remember.
Well, we didn't have, there wasn't shade involved, and Councilman Allegretto said it's hot out there, I'd like to make a motion to add some shade to it. Well, when we took it back the next day and started looking, trying to price shade structures to go over that, we got one, I mean, they're up to $162,000. Whoa. So we started looking at a ton of different companies and gotten prices, so we can get it within the spending authority of city managers.
And then that's, just a technical question, I guess. I mean, really, why is it here if it's already within your spending limit that we granted you?
It normally wouldn't, just because there was a motion made to spend up to $10,000.
I see.
And
So
it was approved, we had to come back and.
So a motion was made to spend 10,000 on the shading, and now you found that it's exceeded that.
Correct.
Gotcha.
I definitely support it. It's not just needed for, hot bars and this and that, but it'll actually prolong the life of the equipment. It's going to make it useful pretty much year round, and it's definitely going to, like I said, prolong the life of the equipment. So it's definitely needed.
You couldn't touch the steel out there.
That'd be hot.
You couldn't touch
That'd be
it.
hot.
All right, any other comments?
Aluminum.
Any other comments from council? Okay. Now, I didn't write it down. We did have
And
a
you-
motion and a second for this.
And you said the money is from TDC?
It's from the half cent.
Half cent sales tax.
Mr. Alfredo, Mr. Mead.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm caught up. No further comments from council? Council, please vote. It does pass 6-0. Thank you, council. Mr. Berry?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to have the Code Enforcement Board reinstated.
We're going to have that discussion.
Oh, did you add it to the,
We've added it to the agenda. Oh, that's going to be item 11.3.
oh, 11 point, okay. Okay, then other than that, thank you, Code Enforcement Board, for doing what you do, but I would like to see you guys ride around the city more and more. If I can do it, I know you can do it. You take your cars, the city car home, well, instead of going straight home, drive around the city, different routes, because I'm seeing a lot of things that need to be taken care of by our city. As far as, there's a house on Hummingbird and Williams that has been deserted or whatever, it's overgrown, and vines, trees, and out into the street. We also have potholes on Tula Place and Williams, I believe it is, Hummingbird. Potholes on Martisa Road, south part of Martisa Road and Jet Drive. A lot of potholes that need to be taken care of. They've repaired those two places last year, but how about doing it the right way so we don't have to keep asking them to come back over and do it again and again? Thank you.
Mr. Jeter?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Councilman Allegretto said about Ferry Park and not just all the hard work that's being done out there, because there's a lot of cool stuff going on, but even like Councilman Meade said last meeting, a lot of times we get caught up in doing a study and doing this and doing that, and I really like Jeff going out there at 10 o'clock at night, the night after the daggone meeting, and taking pictures and doing it the old-fashioned way. I think John even said that meeting, can we just go to United Lighting and try some different bulbs instead of doing some big, long, extended study? And now we're already getting progress and things done over there. So that's really cool to see something work the way it would outside government and the private sector to really move that fast. Second thing, Monday, July 8th at 7 a.m., if anybody has any time, that is, I don't know if all y'all saw it and get the coast or not, but that's when they're kicking off the 12-foot bike path that goes bridge to bridge. That TDC has funded. We also at TDC meeting this morning set up some additional funding where the erosion is happening very, very close to the north side of 98. It's actually got about 5 or 6 feet from the road, the erosion. So they're wanting to do some natural coastline down through there, some rocks and grass, and extend the sand and stuff back out, which will just further enhance the 12-foot bike path. So I know it's a Monday morning, 7 a.m., but it's been going on for a long time, and it's going to be huge to have a 12-foot bike path connect Okaloosa Island to downtown Fort Walton Beach years from now when the bridge is done and brings everybody over here. And then third thing, I know it's coming up later, we just ran out of time at the previous meeting, but thank you, Chief Beige, at the last meeting when you said run parallel. I mean, that is awesome. So you said, tell Jeff that's what we want. I think he heard it loud and clear last meeting, but anytime we can run parallel, we've been saying that. There's a big difference when you get a letter, I think Councilman Meade asked how, or Councilman Schmidt, the process, you get a letter, 30 days later you get a letter, 30 days later, that's 90 days. When a police officer in a uniform and a badge knocks on your door, you'll get results probably in a day or two. So running parallel with the police department, because I'm with Councilwoman DeBerry as well. You can ride around and there are a lot of properties that are not in code, and we need to get them in code if we're ever going to get to 2.0, and it doesn't need to take a year to do it. It needs to take a matter of a couple days. So, you know, and tacking on to that where he said, Chief Beige also said it's a matter of where you hold the bar. I totally agree with you, Chief Beige. It's a matter of where you hold the bar, and I think we can hold it a lot higher, not just on Chris, not just on the police department, but like Mr. Berry's saying, and like Chief Beige said, he reports code cases on his own. I think it's on all of us. It's best to report the cases. Don't just blame it on staff. I think we all need to report code cases in our community. I think staff needs to ride around and do it. I think police department needs to run parallel with them, you know, and putting things in priority. I know me and Councilman Allegretto go back and forth sometimes whether it's dogs or not, but I don't really want to put any of them. I know there's things that are above and beyond. If there's a daggone shooting, then police are going to that first. But whether it's pontoons in your backyard, that may not affect you, but it's affecting our community. Whether it's dogs off a leash, that may not affect me or you, but it's affecting people in our community. So I really think every ordinance that we have was written for a reason, and if it's not a good reason, we'll go back like we did last meeting and we can adjust it. But every ordinance that we have was written for a reason because it was an issue, and I think they should all be enforced evenly across the board. So I wanted to say that last meeting, we just ran out of time. But it's coming up later, so we'll hit on it again.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mead.
And thank you again for the good work you're doing with the parks. Back to our workshop, it would be nice if you're willing over the next week or so, if you could send a kind of a pointed email to all of us saying if you see a code issue, this is the code department, this is who we call. Also, this is the city police department, this is who we can call. So when we do get that phone call or email, we can, copy and paste or whatever method we prefer so that we can send this to all the residents, because it's a multi-faceted issue. Reporting, staff doing their job, and then ultimately when there's a request for a reduction or waiver, then us making the decision, are we going to support staff in what they've done? And so hopefully if we're all working together, then it'll be a better product at the end of the day. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I'm going to withhold my comments till the end of the meeting. So that'll bring us to item 7, public comments. This is the time for anyone out in the audience to speak on items not on the agenda. If it's not on the agenda, you can come forward and speak. Ms. Glover.
Thank you for letting me speak. Glenda Glover, 115 Waynell Circle. I would like to find out if there's any way we can get any speed bumps on Waynell Circle. Within a block and a half, we've got over 10 children, little children. And for some reason, Waynell has become just a bypass. Now, I don't know if it's because of the bridge, but I would like to see some speed bumps put on Waynell Circle. The people that walk their dogs and the children that play, there's a lot going on, and people speed down the street to get home. And I don't blame them, but I would like to look into it. Also, I had asked some months ago about the Shore Drive Park sign that was removed a year or so ago. And I would like to know if it could be put back up.
Is that the one on Bay Drive? I believe Daniel and I will get together on that. That was the one, if I recall, that was the one that we put a sign about midway into the park as people were driving down there. This was about 15, 16 years ago. We put a sign in there that said that it was a public water access, and we put it said no vehicles beyond this point. It was.
No, this sign sat right on the street. For some reason, the owner that's on the north side of our park has the right way. His driveway is on our park. Why that ever happened, I don't know. But I just would like the fact that you all have paid a lot of money for somebody to tell us that we need more access. And that sign used to be there. Chris Gibson and I talked about it many times. And I would like to see the Shore Drive Park sign put back in place.
I do recall, Ms. Glover, that we did, like I said, there was one, I was with the sign people when we put one in, and it was probably 2008. And we put it up out there, it was probably about 15, 20 steps into right off the right of way. But there hasn't been a sign out on the road since I've been here. I was with him when they put the sign up, but it was as you got into a little bit about 15 steps. But Daniel and I can look at it and go.
Well, the sign was there when Chris Gibson was on council, and when I was a part of the council, and that was before 2003.
Yeah, Daniel and I can get on that.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir.
Good evening, I'm Bill Taylor. I'm a resident here in Fort Walton Beach, American wife here in 76, and I love this town. I love living here, raise my children. So the things I want to complain about are not because I don't want to be here. It's because I'm a resident here, okay, and I want it to improve. And the one thing I'd like to encourage is that not only do code enforcement look after the residents, I think code enforcement ought to write up the city too, about things that they're failing to do, as I'm seeing in areas. Like on Mooney Road, where I do live, you have a street sweeper. He'll come along a city street, he'll pick up his brushes, drive by my street because I'm on Mooney, even though I pay city taxes, and wave hi to me as he drives by and then turns right, puts his brushes back down because that's a city street. Now, I know there's a portion of my money that pays for street cleaning, but I think that we can share things in here a little bit too. Start a little bit more cooperation, even though that Mooney Road is considered to be maintained by the county. There's nothing wrong with that street sweeper leaving his brushes down as he passes my house and keeping the streets clean, and that's kind of shared community responsibilities. I had a stormwater sewer pipe increase near my home, and it was really nice. It's going to increase the flow of water. After it was all done, I had county people out there talking about keeping the ditches cleaned up because that's their responsibility. And they said, you know, it sure would have been nice that the city would have called us up and let us know they were going to increase the pipe size here. We just don't seem to get any calls from the city, which I'm not saying it, all departments are the way. These were comments that were made that I think the county and the city ought to be sure that there's ways of communicating between, this is our community. Our lines aren't painted on the streets or on the sidewalks. We are a community here. And I've heard this pastor here talk about wanting us to pray together, to work together, and I think we ought to keep our minds open upon that. And so when I see not only people with problems at their home, I think their businesses ought to keep the front of their businesses clean. I think entrances into their parking lots ought to be kept clean and swept up. I think the weeds ought to be cut back. And if they're not going to do that, then get permission to concrete it over. If you're not going to keep it looking decent in our city, because we looked at it as a community. And that's part of what I think I see, that we ought to be working together, not just who can complain the loudest and get the most grease in the wheels. And then, I don't believe in that personally. We ought to work together, but someone ought to say something to get things started, like you talking about, Mr. Bryce. I like those ideas. But another one too, which I was talking with Payne about earlier, I'd like to have some discussion about how our power bills in our cities can be reduced back to maybe where they were with Gulf Power before this other people came in here and raised our, nothing's going to change, but it did change. My bill certainly went up significantly. And I'd like to put some discussion out there, if it's possible, to find a way of reducing our bills, which maybe another power supply company here can maybe come in and help us reduce our bills. Eglin Air Force Base made that decision by switching their suppliers a few years ago. Maybe we ought to be thinking about the same thing. I think that they got quite a few heads out there that figured out it was cheaper to change over to another company than stay with where they were at. So that's one thing. Another one is that our citizens in our city are getting notices from their homeowners insurance people that they're going to cancel their policy because their roof is over 15 years old. They don't give any specification about it, but they say they're going to cancel your policy. I really don't care for that either. When Granny puts down her deposit, here's my money, get my policy started. 30 days later, she gets a letter in the mail saying, we're going to cancel your insurance policy if you don't replace your roof. Then she says, well, I've used all my money from my deposit. I can afford my monthly payments, but not another $15,000 or $20,000 for a new roof. I think I have a solution for that, but I know it's on the state side, but we ought to work as a community, again, to be promoting the people that represent us in the state to do the right thing and start protecting us as a community, even on the insurance side, and start challenging these people with what they're saying to our citizens. I'm talking about even from our city council saying, why do you do this in here? What is your position? Can you please come to our meetings and explain yourselves why you want to say that about their roof is no good? I know the state takes a long time to resolve things, but maybe we can get them on a little bit more local level here. But there's my comments for the evening.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sir?
Yes.
Talk to your legislators. Talk to your legislators about your insurance. I dropped my insurance policy 20, almost 30 years ago. I'm self-insured. I invested that money, and I could rebuild my house twice now.
Yes, I have. I've already got a meeting set.
Yeah, talk to your legislators. Talk to your legislators.
Anyone else wish to speak? Ma'am.
I would just like some clarification because we've already discussed that you cannot file a complaint with the Code Enforcement Board without giving your name and address, correct?
A complaint with the Code Enforcement Division
Right.
with the,
But you have to disclose who's filing the complaint.
correct.
And that's
the
a
complaint.
state law.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so now y'all can, is it my understanding that all of you can file a complaint with the Code Enforcement Board without giving all that information? In other words, could we as residents call our city council people and say, there's a problem at 42 Bay Drive, and you can report it?
I've done it. I have done it.
So if they report it, they become the reporter. If they want to take that on themselves, they now become a witness. And I would advise they don't do that personally, but if they want to do that,
But
that's their
people
own
aren't
decision.
going to report problems if they have to disclose because they're afraid of neighbor retaliation. So I'm trying to find a way to get around that so that people don't feel intimidated, and they'll help code enforcement. Because there's only 3 people in code enforcement, so there's not enough, it's just like anything else. There's not enough police, there's not enough this, that, whatever. But, so I'm trying to help code enforcement if we can call our city council and not be intimidated by giving name and that. So I'm asking.
I think Mr. Burns gave you the right answer. If we take that on, then
So,
we're-
well, I'm asking,
we're
are
the
y'all?
ones. So it would be individual choices up here, whether the councilman wanted to do that or not.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
It's something that happened earlier when Chris was up there speaking, and I just didn't feel right about it. I didn't know what I didn't feel right about it, but, I was reading on the codes recently and saw where you can't make them anonymous. There was a law that was
Right.
passed that
That's
said
right.
you can't make them
That's
anonymous.
right, yeah.
So there must have been a reason behind it. I'm not saying it was good, bad, or indifferent. I don't know, but that was a law that was passed. So I was a little concerned, Chris, when I heard you say, and it's just the way the world works, I guess, but he said that if someone calls in and expresses they don't want to be known, he says, okay, well, you won't be known, but we're going to drive by and check it. So I'm like, well, that just it's always a cat and mouse in code
Except in a
enforcement.
safety issue.
He said only during an issue of safety. Like,
Right.
for instance, if your fence is knocked down and there's an open pool back there and a child could wander into it, that's a case where they're going to take that call, not follow the guidelines of, we need to know it was Ms. Trineri that called in about the pool. They're going to immediately go over there and take care of the issue because it's an issue of public safety.
Well, and maybe I'll go back and review it for sure, because that's when Chief Beige came up and spoke, and he did say those words. He says there are exceptions for safety.
Right.
He said for public safety. So, but prior to that, I was listening to Chris say that we're just going to drive by, and I'm like, well, okay. So they kind of did make an anonymous one. Now staff's just going to drive by. And I'm like, well, okay, there's no complainant that's going to be listed, as last week happened with the gentleman with the granite shop that they just drove by. Now, did an anonymous person call in, the neighbor call in, business neighbor call in, and didn't want to express his name, and Chris said, we'll just drive by? I don't know, but that's what came out, and that's why I was a little uneasy. I'm like, I kind of see it both ways. But that's what I heard, so I'll go back and review it. And I know Chief Beige said there were exceptions for public safety, and thank goodness, if there's a tree on a power line in the neighbor's house, then yes, go out there. But someone thinks that the neighbor's grass is 9 when it's supposed to be 8. Why did the state pass a law saying no more anonymous call, no more anonymous? I don't know, but review it yourself as well, and
Okay, is there a way to find out which of you, other than Mr. Berry, that would allow us to call?
I don't know of a way to do that in this forum. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chris, if you would like, because I mentioned that, if you would like to come up and clarify what you might have intended or what I didn't hear or did hear.
Sure, thank you. I mean, I agree with what Councilman Alvarez said and Chief Page said. You know, that's, you know, there was that provision, that exclusion that allows us to act on those, you know, without having it on the record there. What I was implying or trying to say too on there to clarify was the fact that, you know, our inspectors are in the field every day driving around.
Sure.
It may be the same property that someone complains on, but it's not initiated by that complaint. It's initiated by something that we can see, you know, with our own two eyes, and that's a code violation. So,
I put myself in your position. I answer the phone, or one of your techs answers the phone, and the person says, "Hey, they've got a camper they're renting out." Mm-hmm. Okay, you need to file a complaint. Oh, I don't want to. Well, then it's like, well, what position are you in? You're like, well, I know about one. Mm-hmm. You know about one, so you drive by it. So I don't know where the anonymous call, why they stopped anonymous reporting. I don't know why, but apparently someone somewhere said no more of that. I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Comment? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to go to item 8, resolutions, excuse me. Item 8.1, 2024-8, the resolution adopting the FY 2024-25 CDBG Annual Action Plan. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Fort Walton Beach, Florida, adopting the FY 2024-25 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan and providing an effective date. Mr. Pressetti.
Thank you. Chris Pressetti, Growth Management Director. So you all may be familiar with this item. It's something that we do present annually. The city is what's considered an entitlement community through the Community Development Block Grant Program, which is a federal program through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So each year, being that we are an entitlement community, we do have to prepare and submit an annual action plan to HUD. For our funding by August, the middle of August each year. It's federally required. So each year they do appropriate a different amount based on a formula that HUD has for these dollars federally. And so this year we were allocated just over $134,000. As we typically do each year, we have a citizens advisory committee made up of several members of the community that represent the target groups for this program, and we work with them to come up and develop recommendations based on applications requests for this funding that we receive. So HUD has certain requirements as far as an application period. There are public notices, there's public meetings held to allow community input. And then after the application period, we hold these meetings as we draft a plan, and we work with our Citizens Advisory Committee to develop recommendations that we present to you all as a city council. So this year, as I mentioned, there's about $134,000 in a funding allocation from HUD, and we received about $284,000 in funding request. So from that, we had to obviously work on trying to reduce that amount to what we actually have that we can allocate and award out to the various subrecipients. And so when we do that, there are certain CDBG spending caps and limits on this funding that we have to so consider. 20% of the $134,000 or so goes towards planning and administration overhead costs to administer the program. Public services, there are certain activities that are considered public services. You can't allocate more than 15% of your funding towards public services, and then at least 70% of the funding has to be allocated to activities that benefit low to moderate income people. So in this case this year, our public service funding cap was just over $20,000 at $20,126.10. And so when we go down and look at these, what we've done with the CAC is we kind of pull out the public services, figure out how much how many requests and how much in funding is requested for public services, and then figure out, okay, well, we've got 20,000 to allocate to that, and then we try to narrow it down with the CAC to figure out, what activities meet all of the HUD criteria. In some cases, we have some of the same recipients year after year. We look at those that have maybe outstanding funding that they haven't spent yet, different initiatives, goals as a community, as a city council, as a CAC. And so for this year, we have developed this annual action plan, and we do have our recommendations from the CAC in here as well. And we are looking to award various funding to a lot of different activities here, including the SHU Educational Foundation. They're one of the public services that fell within that cap. They did request over $80,000, but unfortunately, as public service, they had to fit within the $20,000. So what we did in here, what the staff and CSC recommendation is to basically split half of that to the SHU Foundation, and then the other half of it to the Mental Health Association. And then from there, the rest of the funding could be distributed out to public facilities. And so we have a facility at the First Community Baptist Church, a Bridgeway Center funding, House of Deliverance Church, Mental Health Association with some additional public facility funding, and then One Hopeful Place for some facility funding. So with that, staff does respectfully recommend City Council's adoption of Resolution 2024-8 to approve the fiscal year 2024-25 CDBG Annual Action Plan and a fiscal year 21-22 CDBG Annual Action Plan substantial amendment as recommended by the CAC. Just to touch quickly on that substantial plan amendment, that was due to leftover funds that were not going to be spent, and we were just looking to reallocate those as well during this time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from council for Mr. Persett? Mr. Jeter?
The CAC, how is that? What group is that? How's it?
Sure. So they're residents. Mr. Barry Gray actually is one of our CAC members. They've been around since before I've been at the city. So what we have is a citizen participation plan. HUD requires every community to have a citizen participation plan. And so that was our citizen participation plan was adopted by resolution back in 2008.
And how many people are on it?
So there's five typically. Sometimes there's a vacancy in four, but there's five. And what they are, they represent either minority, low-income, elderly target groups for HUD. And they actually, the current members we have and the way that the process works is that the existing members nominate other members of that target group to be added to the CAC if one retires or leaves. So,
and this is just their advisory. We can shift this money around
yes,
as long as it
fits within the boxes for public services or the income criteria.
And it doesn't have to be divided. So when you say there's 70% left, as long as it goes towards funding towards low to moderate income benefit.
The biggest challenge is the 15% for public services. At least 70% has to go towards low to moderate income. In this case, that's 100%, so we don't have to worry about that. And the really big thing that we have to worry about is the 15% public services. Out of these requests, the vast majority were public services, and so if you have $100,000, $150,000 of requests, they're all fighting over $20,000. And so that's the challenge. That's the real box we have to fit in is that 15%. We can't exceed that to the penny there. So.
Do we have? I feel like when this came up last year, or even midway through the year, there was some of the money from last year that still hadn't been moved yet, and we had discussed like.
The amounts that I apologize for kind of really just briefly running over it. The substantial plan amendment is that extra money. So what we had was the Okaloosa County Head Start Center. They had funding allocated from 21-22, fiscal year 21-22, and they had 20,000 left over. And with their changes and everything over there, they told us we're not going to use the money, and they returned it back to the program. So we have to reallocate it to something. What we're recommending was to put it into our housing rehab nuisance abatement program, which does the re-roofs and like sewer lateral replacements for the low-income or elderly people. Because that program has pretty good success of us getting roofs replaced. So that was the amount left over, 20,000. Everything else, actually, all that outstanding prior year money, I say all of the sub-recipients have done a good job of getting that spent. We're staying very timely with HUD and all the requirements there. We're really just getting down to the last little bit, and this was an amount that they were not going to spend. They told us, you know.
Got it.
So.
Mr. Mead? No.
You mentioned the Shoe Foundation. I've seen them come in here and lobby for one or the other, which makes me question, you know, why we're the concept of this. Aren't there qualifying parks that we can allocate this money to
We've
bathrooms?
received some funding in past for depending on the neighborhood and
Yeah, the big thing with it, it has to be an activity. I mean, it could be like the pickleball court was one we did several years ago. It has to be something that we can clearly tie to a target group for HUD, which is elderly and low to moderate income individuals or children. Or be in one of the specific target areas, which is an area on the map defined on our maps. The current boundaries for target areas, if you look at them on a map, they don't seem to make sense as far as where you would think were those low to moderate income areas. So it makes it very difficult to do a target area project. If a park was in a target area, we could do it. Unfortunately, our current target area maps from HUD don't seem to make a lot of sense. So say every project we really do falls into, we have to individually income qualify the user and show that the person receiving the benefit fits in that income level or age criteria. So for the pickleball, we were able to say, you know, that's a target group for the elderly. At the time, we didn't have one. It was the first one, and that was the user base, and that's how we justified that. You know, we could always look at those types of initiatives in the future too. All these recommendations, council obviously has the decision to do it. We do, you know, run stuff through our CAC as well.
I'm one of many, but I'd love to see it, you know, something that tangible that we could see here.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd love to see a map, but I'd also love to, well, that breakdown. So that breakdown, you could use 100% of the funding, minus the administrative planning and this and that. That's not gonna be considered public service, so you could use all of it to do something with. If you found a park, do we use all of it years ago to do a pickleball court somewhere?
No, that was only a small portion of it.
That's not capped at 15% though.
Only public service is capped at 15%.
So you could use all of it.
The rest of it can go towards any other facilities. There's a lot of restrictions in what can and can't be done with that. But you know, public benefit type things like the pickleball court we did, it just has to be tied specifically to a user group that's allowed to benefit from it. So that's why we do the housing rehab, sewer lateral replacements, things that we actually income qualify. We get income qualification on all of those people that use it.
Can you send the map?
Yes.
I'd be interested to see it.
Yeah, and I've talked with my staff recently about getting with HUD to see if we can. That map's been in place for several years, and it feels like it probably should have been updated, you know, somewhere around by now, with, you know, income numbers constantly changing census-wise, and also we were talking recently about trying to see get with HUD and see how we can get that reevaluated and see if they could change, because honestly, there's areas downtown that are in the target area, but areas, you know, elsewhere in the city that you would think would be those low to moderate income that are not. So that makes it a little more challenging when we have to income qualify everybody that uses these things. So.
Thank you. Mr. Walker?
Yeah, so along with the map would be helpful, and, you know, as I was looking it over, I, you know, go down to the ones that weren't approved, and it's, you know, one of them's food for the needy, and I'm like, man, how did they get turned down? So I know that they have more information than we do currently, but I know what would help me, maybe from a curiosity sake, I don't know, but having a dollar figure here. For example, I was trying to figure out why maybe free lab work wasn't granted, you know, for the needy, and the food assistance program. Why weren't those? And I'm like, well, if they were each asking for 100,000, they could have been prioritized and said, we can't do that, but we can help out 6 with the money. So to have the dollar figures up here by those that are approved, one hopeful place, which I looked at it and had not heard of the Hollingsworth Health Clinic, so I looked it up online, and the Daily News did an article on it, which I read here just a second ago. I see it's to remodel, but it's funny, the first paragraph of that Daily News says it was just remodeled in 2019 for $37,400 from the CDBG grant.
Yes.
So I'm not, and it's a mobile, what do you call it, a mobile classroom?
It's like a modular structure. It's an
Modular structure.
It's an old school district building.
So-
I was actually talking to my team about that one when this one came through because I was the original remodel in 2018, 19. We actually did it as a city project, and I was the project manager on it. So when this came in, I said, I did that. We spent that money years ago. So I asked what this request was for, and this request specifically is that the siding is in need of replacement. The flooring is actually, it was a cheap flooring that was done that's coming up. They were asking to put awnings and entryways by the doors outside, as well as redoing some of the HVAC system and vents because there's open vents between rooms, and if they have private patient meetings, for confidentiality, they don't want the sound. So it's various upgrades to the building.
They call it a remodel, and I'm just feeling a problem. I mean, it was nice to hear that, it's a framework of their recommendation. So when it comes up here to us, we can shift it, but I don't know how much money each one of them's asking. I can't perform the same duties and roles that the CAC, we can't. I mean, it's kind of like we should have the same information they had. What is they're needing, siding. And then this food program down here it's only $5,000 and they're needing $40,000 for remodel. I'm like, I'm going to pick this priority over that priority, but we don't have that information here to decide that.
Sure, and the challenge, I was kind of trying to get to with the public service cap is that, so for example, the food assistance program and the lab work, those are public services. So that falls into, we have 20,000 basically right this year, but 20,000 that can go towards any public service. So when we see these, the recommendations that we came up with at the CAC was to do, some towards the Shoe Foundation, some towards Mental Health Association for that public service. If we don't want to go that way, then that's where you're looking at the food assistance outreach or Bridgeway. I will say the reason that we did not this year is when my team and the CAC, we were looking at these, we looked at how much money, if they had any outstanding funding, how long it took them to spend prior year funds. For the Catholic Charities Outreach Program, that's one of the first street programs down here, and they took a couple of years they were pretty slow in spending that money. Now, a lot of it may have been due to COVID and some of those issues that happened back then, but when we looked at saying, hey, if we, HUD requests and specifies that we spend this money in a timely manner. There's a scoring, a rating system that the community gets for spending it in a timely manner, and that if we have organizations here such as the Shoe Foundation, such as Mental Health Association that have a good track record of spending their funding in a timely manner and don't have any funding at this moment, then they got a priority from the CAC and staff on that. Catholic Charities, like I said, Bridgeway, they've also received funding in the past. Really every one of the associations, with the exception of the First Community Baptist Church, have received funding in the past from us. So that's where we work together to come up with these recommendations.
Thank you. The public services that you mentioned is capped at $20,000.
Yes.
So the top two are public services, the Shoe Foundation and the Mental Health Association. Are those 10 each, or is one 7, one's 3?
It's 10,000, and then mental health was 10,126 and 10 cents to zero out that balance. But
so theoretically, just theoretically too, we as a council, we could go 5, 5, and 10.
Yes.
Or 5, 5, 5, and 5. Cover all public services, yes. 5,000 each. We could.
Yes.
But we really don't have. I don't feel I've got great information to be. These people and entities need and could use money. When does this have to be submitted by?
We have to transmit it to the state by August 15th.
So is it possible that we could regroup with a little bit more information with some dollar figures associated here? You get maybe the same stuff the CAC looked at to council and let us look and decide if it's something that we're gonna have to put it in place. We just might shift around some money. Can't shift around any money today, not knowing the need, I guess is fair to say. If council, if.
That was my question as well. When's the deadline? We're gonna have time. Could we do that? I don't know if we have the timing there tonight. If we do, yeah.
Sounds like we do.
Yeah, we just have to find a meeting to get it to, because we have to have it approved by council, to be able to transmit prior to August 15th is the only, that's our deadline for us.
Do we have a meeting by August 15th?
Well, we got a big budget workshop on 12, and then we're going to do the next one on 27 of August, so that workshop will happen.
It's a line item on the agenda of which you will be able to get us the backup material in advance. So when we come in, whichever agenda it's on, we're going to have a discussion about it and see if there's any shifting around of any of that money. And could be quick, could be long.
Well, we're looking at doing a workshop.
I need to get it.
We're a budget workshop, and the council meeting will be August 27th, so we have a voting.
But Chris, you need it by August 15th, correct?
Before that, it has to be sent to HUD.
We don't have meetings in July, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Mr. Allegretto?
Thank you, Mayor. I eventually will get to a question, Chris. First of all, thank you to Barry Gray and many others who have participated over the years as part of that Citizens Advisory Committee. And thank you to Barry and mainly Barry, but some others, for bringing this grant to our city. Because this is a federal grant that goes around the country to some communities, but not all. And if he and the city didn't do all that type of work, this is federal money, that's our tax dollars, just like all federal money, that would be going to other cities. So it's great that it comes to our city. I am of the personal opinion that we have a Citizens Advisory Council to make these decisions for us. These are all worthy charities or not worthy charities. I personally don't want to be the one who's deciding you get $5,000, you get $6,000, you get $10,000. I think that's what that group and that board is for, and I think our staff works well in conjunction with that board to kind of purse through all of those projects and make those decisions. I know that, for instance, the Shoe Educational Foundation was on the list last year, correct? And they received $0, correct?
Correct.
But they did request money last year, correct? So it's that kind of thing that every year makes me feel a little uneasy about saying, hey, hey, we got this money in, and now we're going to go through and study which ones are the best and which ones are the worst and which ones need it the most. And that's a lot. And I'm thankful for Mr. Gray and that group, and I'm thankful for our staff that have gone through and done that work for us so that we can arrive here and say, you have $134,000. Now, my other question, which I ask every year, is there any way that we could ever do this money in a different way to where our administration and planning costs were not the full 20%? If we say, as someone brought up, I believe it was Mr. Mead in conjunction with Mr. Jeter, said, hey, here's a park that would fit all of these needs and, something like that. If it were going to one place, because I do understand it's a lot of work for your staff, it's a lot of follow-up, it's all those things that have to be done over many, many, many months, and obviously sometimes years. If it were a simpler thing where we were saying, or where the Citizens Advisory Committee got together and said, hey, well, if it was just this, then we wouldn't have a full $26,834 in administrative costs. We could really fund this one thing. Is that something that you guys do discuss or could discuss?
We could definitely discuss it, yeah. Because, I'll say, at the present, it is a lot of work. We have one planner that's dedicated to this, among certain other things she does. But she really runs this program, interacting with a lot of people. And with our housing rehab program, we actually go out, we get bids from contractors, we project manage roof replacements, do a lot of replacements, in addition to interacting with all these sub-recipients, making sure that they submit all these receipts, and we have to line item review the receipts to come into process to finance. We do have a software that we pay for out of this portion as well to help expedite that whole grant reimbursement process and processing, as well as any training that may come up from HUD that we have to attend. So there's a combination of things. What we can certainly do, we can certainly review it, and really, if there's something, say, next year or whenever, that, we decide as a city, as a council, that, hey, you know what, we know we're gonna get around $100,000, and we wanna put it towards one project. We wanna focus on that. That's something we can absolutely do, and instead of doing the standard application period process, we could really fund it out towards one big project or two smaller projects. That is all within our discretion. I'll say, for example, 10, 12 years ago, we wanted to do a streetscape stormwater improvement project on Carson Street and 3rd Street in that area, and that at the time was a target area, so we could do that type of project. It's not at the moment, but we dedicated 1 year our CDBG funding to the design, to hire a engineering firm to do the design, civil engineering work for that project. The cost ultimately far exceeded what we had in CDBG. That's also in our CRA, so then we leveraged and offset that project with CRA funds. Those are the types of things we can certainly do. That's really, probably best timely-wise a discussion as you get later in the year, because the application period and processing has to happen beginning in March and then into April. We receive our funding allocation anywhere from March this year. Unfortunately, it made us a little more challenging from our side, as we didn't get our funding allocation amount from HUD until May. So we were starting the preliminary review process without knowing how much money we had. So it was a lot of back and forth with the CAC trying to figure out where the moving target was. But we can definitely look at large scale projects versus individual. It just comes to setting the goal, setting the expectation, and doing it.
Or really just where that sweet spot is, as if David were here, he would say that delta, where that number is, where you could say to these groups, hey, if we all got $30,000 or $35,000 or whatever that number is, then we could reduce the amount of administrative planning fee that has to come out of here for our people. So that way we could say, now we can fund 3 good projects rather than just throwing 10.
The biggest,
again, I'm not saying this to make a motion or tell you how to do it. I'm just bringing this up for next year and down the line when you guys meet again, Barry and Mr. Persetti, when you guys meet again, you could say, hey, what if we tried it this way?
We can
see what comes.
We can absolutely do that. And really for that overhead, that planning and admin cost, the best way for us to accomplish that is to have fewer applications, fewer projects, activities. Something else I'll get with Nicole in finances is a portion of that actually does offset the salary of our planner, so there's a financial FTE aspect to it.
Absolutely good.
For sure.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. Mr. Mead.
I too appreciate Mr. Gray. Every time I turn around, you're involved in another aspect of the city or the county, a real member of the community, so thank you. And I do remember when the 3rd Street and Carson Street project began, because it was one of those that took a lot of time. It was another one of those studies, but it worked. And to this day, a couple of nights a week, I drive that road, and it's well lit. There's people going and coming, and I believe we acquired some real estate to put some of our stormwater to a voluntary acquisition. But either way, that was impactful, and it's nice to see it, on a weekly basis. So I guess that's what I was talking about when I said it's got to be a park. It's got to be something that we can turn our attention to, and but being appreciative for everything that's going on. So thank you.
Mr. Walker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gray. Same thing, you're involved and so appreciated. Trying to figure out how the clock works again on the budget. So in previous year's budgets, I'll go look at those. Will I find a revenue source line item showing CDGB projected revenue?
It's the grant amount.
That's the awarded grant. There's no projected revenue.
Right.
It's the money we get. The 134.
Right, but 134 was the total, and we're getting a percentage of 20% of the 134. Is that correct?
For planning and administration.
Correct.
134 is the grant we're receiving. Under that, we have separate sections for each activity that's funded, and planning and administration.
And it's a reimbursable grant, so we don't get the money until after the fact, and then I go in and approve it, and then I think it's every time is every quarter we take a quarter of the
Do about quarterly, yes. What they do is it's called drawdowns, and so we just have to, as money is spent by the subrecipients or by us for our hours and worked, we report to HUD, and they reimburse that amount quarterly.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else from council? Anyone from the public wish to speak to this? And there's Mr. Gray.
I'm Barry Gray from 217 Burnett Avenue. And I'd like to thank the staff, because it's a great staff that we work with throughout the year. And to you, Mr. Walker, a lot of people that didn't make the list, there's a lot of people I wanted on the list that we couldn't, because when we sit down with staff and community people, we have to stay in HUD guidelines. And a lot of times there's people, I say, let's do this, and they say, well, no, we gotta stay in HUD guideline. But that's one major problem that we do have with CDC, that program, is a lot of people apply for the grant, but can't spend the money. So when, that's when you come in and say, well, let's get $10,000 this year, but you still have $5,000 from the year before you didn't spend. So what we do, we try to deal with nonprofits and say, well, the ones who have a zero balance on the book. And we have done some great programs through, like in fact, you just said, Mr. Mead, we can take it and put it on one program. In the last several years, we was able to take a portion of that money and put it into code enforcement to fix people with low income or seniors, it was mostly seniors, roofs. The ones with the insurance program that couldn't afford the insurance had to get updated roofs. So I think, I don't know how many we did last year, the year before, and that's what we did this year again, is allocating funding for low income roofing and code enforcement. So if there's someone in the city that has a code enforcement violation, they can come back to CDC with money that was allocated and fix those code violations. So we're looking at doing things like that. And with our organization, we meet groups, we meet all year. I mean, non-paid, we meet, and we look at things, and our whole thing is that a couple of years back with the city, you guys probably don't remember when the city used to come in and say, well, this is the city recommendation. This is the advisory committee recommendation. But HUD didn't like that. They wanted us to be as one. If you couldn't be as one, you couldn't have the program. So when you do it, so that's very important. You have an advisory committee and the staff. But we do as a group, we take the city, our job is to protect the city and make sure the money's spent and stay in HUD guidelines. So we do everything to help the residents of the city of Fort Walton Beach and stay in HUD guidelines to satisfy you guys. But thanks for letting me be an opportunity to be on that committee and serving the city of Fort Walton.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, maybe Mr. Gray, thanks for bringing that back up again about the roof, because back on Moriarty, that came up back then, and I asked if we had that program, roofing, and yes, and I asked if that violator had been informed of the program or the application process. He had not at that time. I know you say he's coming into compliance. Is that including the roof replacement?
It's not. It's all the other litter and items on the property. We did contact him. We did give him all the application, all the information for this housing rehab program.
Okay.
Told him how to apply. He has not applied at this time, but he does have all the information. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments from council? Questions? Seeing none, council, may we get a motion?
Mayor, recommend adoption of the fiscal year 24-25 CDBG annual action plan and the fiscal year 2021-22 CDBG annual action plan substantial amendment as recommended by the Citizens Advisory Committee and as required by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Thank you, sir. May I get a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Councilman Allegretto, seconded by Councilwoman DeBerry to adopt FY 24-25 CDBG annual action plan as described by Mr. Allegretto. Any further comments?
No, sir.
Comments?
Could we request that next year as it comes forward that dollar amounts do be, that they are provided for each line item there, just so we can avoid this discussion again next time? Maybe it'll help us if there is a little tweak of something we could look at.
Absolutely, and I'll maybe take it a step farther if that's all right. I know some of the comments about maybe even other projects and activities, I'm thinking maybe late in the year or beginning of next calendar year, we do a workshop or a special item to talk about what we want to do priorities wise. Do we want to keep it as we're doing it or do something different, bigger, separate, so that we have a good plan leading into the spring and then we know where we want to go with it.
I don't disagree with you, Mr. Walker.
But yeah, we can certainly do that.
I agree.
Yeah.
And, you know, and along those lines, thank you for that suggestion. Maybe, I don't know when CAC starts getting the applications or when they first do get them, but, you know, I don't know, maybe we get a copy or, you know, because these are important items to the community. It's federal money, it is our money, so
Yep.
we can lobby.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can certainly get more information on that background because we do, we do receive applications from them. They're submitted electronically to us, and we work with the CAC on all that background stuff. So I apologize for not having all of the rest of it on here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, what we all said, maybe a workshop next year a little bit ahead of time, so we know,
Exactly.
we all know Barry,
Yep.
but who are the other 4 people on the CAC, and how are they being advised and tugged and pulled? And I definitely would like to see next year one specific park, maybe less administration fees, maybe not just one park, maybe 1 or 2 programs, but more of one chunk going to one place. But again, got to see the map, got to know where we can spend it, got to know got to know all the other details.
Exactly.
So I dang sure don't want to, vote no and say that tonight, and then we lose the money or run out because we don't have time to have another meeting between now and then.
So-
But definitely next year,
I think it's a great idea.
100% more involved.
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea. We've kind of been status quo for a long time, so it's probably a good opportunity to kind of refresh it, get some good ideas going, educate everyone, I think, on it, all these rules and all, and get some good stuff.
Any other comments, Council? Mr. Mead?
I agree, and I do appreciate all the hard work, and I'll vote in favor of it, but like I mentioned before, the Shoe Foundation, if they come in and lobby for one thing or the other, should we be awarding money? I've got questions about that, but I think for the sake of today, I do support what they've done and appreciate what they've done. Keeping the 3rd Street project in mind, I'm hopeful that we have this lead time to hopefully next year have some ideas between the group and staff on this is a street, or this is a neighborhood, or this is a stormwater project that we can do to, have something that we can all remember to make an impact on our city.
Yeah, I think we can definitely start now on that and be ready to go for that time.
Thank you.
Seeing nothing. Council, please vote. It does pass 6-0. Thank you, Council. That'll bring us to item 9, ordinances on second reading. 2151, ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, section 2.00.05, city excess real property. Mr. Burns.
Okay, this is ordinance number 2151, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fort Walton Beach, Florida, amending the City of Fort Walton Beach Code of Ordinances, section 2.00.05, city excess real property, provide for applicability, provide for severability, and provide for an effective date. This is a quasi-legislative hearing, and I believe Mr. Rossetto will present on that just that.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So this is the second reading of this ordinance that we discussed at our previous meeting. This is for an amendment to Chapter 2 of our Code of Ordinances regarding it's the sections for excess real property, but this has to do with the city-owned reverter interests that are contained within deeds. This is an item that I actually worked with Mr. Burns on, bouncing some ideas back and forth to develop this, and really there's no change from first reading, and just to summarize it in a nutshell, this has to do with properties that maybe at some point in the past, or could be in the future, if there's a reverter interest on a deed, and someone's looking to request the city either remove, amend, change that reverter interest, this just sets the policy, the process in place for how they go about requesting the city council's consideration of that request. Currently, there's nothing in the Code of Ordinances, and there's nothing addressing this in Florida statute. And so all this is doing is just putting in just a very short and simple process that allows someone to request, submit an application to the city manager and request to amend or remove that city-owned reverter interest with a few criteria. We have not made any changes since first reading and not received any public comment as well for this item. So with that, staff does respectfully recommend the adoption of Ordinance 2151 to amend Chapter 2.00.05 of the Code of Ordinances related to the amendment process for amendment or removal of city-owned reverter interest in real property. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Questions from council for Mr. Frasetti?
That was the gentleman that came, he had the church and the land next to him was donated by the city, but it was for single-family homes.
Mm-hmm.
and now he's wanting to put multifamily or townhomes on
Townhomes, effectively, yes, and that's where they ran into it with theirs. It was an interesting, I guess, background in 1995
Right.
with that. But they want to do residential, but not the single-family residential, and it was restricted to either single-family residential, detached on those platted lots, or parking for the church. They want to do residential, but just at a different density, different considerations. So that's where he, I'm sure will be, if approved, will be in requesting this process.
Yeah, so in the future, if this passes, somewhat, because they're pretty rare, I believe, but if they were to have a reverter clause, because we, or the past ones or the future ones, say you have to use it for X, but we're going to retain the reverter clause so that if you don't do that, we can get it back. So they come through this process in the future, they still have to come before council?
Yes, it would still be,
remove the
it's entirely up to council whether you want to, remove that from it or not. This just gives a process, so as Mr. Burns and I discussed, right now there's no process in here. We could have just brought his one specific request here, but, we don't know how many of these could be floating out there around the city on deeds, and if it's next year or 50 years from now, by doing this, it just sets a nice little easy process. So if someone comes in with that request, we say, yep, here, submit that application. We prepare a staff report to city council, and then the council can decide ultimately if you want to accept or not that request.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Berry.
Please help me, or explain this to me. Such as the land that the city hall is sitting on now, was deeded to us from the Liza Jackson Foundation, correct? Does this...
It's kind of the opposite of that. So it's somewhat the opposite of that. So this is property that was deeded to us that we own with the reverter back to the original family. This would deal with properties that were originally city-owned that were sold or transferred to a private party, and there's a reverter on their deed back to give it back to us if they don't follow the rules. So
this is where we hold the reversionary interest as opposed to the Liza Jackson family owning the reversionary interest.
Okay, that's what I needed to clarify.
Other questions from council for Mr. Paccetti? Anyone from the public want to comment on this? Council, may we get a motion?
A motion to adopt ordinance 2151 to amend chapter 2.00.05 of Code of Ordinances, establishing a process for amendment or removal of city-owned reverter interest in real property.
Second.
Been moved by Councilman Jeter, and second by Councilman Allegretto to approve 2151, the ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, section 2.00.05, city excess real property. Further comment?
No, sir.
Comment? Council, please vote. Does pass 6-1, or 6-0. Thank you. Brings us item 10, appointments. Nomination of a voting delegate for the 2024 Florida League of Cities Annual Conference. Mr. Peters.
Sure.
Or Ms. Barnes.
Either one. Sorry. So annually at the Florida League of Cities, they ask for an appointment by the council for someone who is attending the conference to be the voting delegate for the city. So staff is requesting that council make an appointment, and to my knowledge, Mayor, you're the only one that I'm aware of that's going to this event.
Okay. I am going, that's a fact, yeah.
So apparently, he's our option.
Would you be willing to be nominated?
And I will be willing to be nominated, yes.
Nominate the mayor.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilman Meade and seconded by Councilman Allegretto to nominate me to be the voting delegate at the League of Cities meeting on July 31st, 2024. Thank you. I guess council vote, please vote. Thank you for your vote of confidence. Thank you. Item 11, action, direction, discussion. Authorization to negotiate with Premium Parking to provide parking management services for the City Hall parking lot. Mr. Paccetti.
Thank you. So this is an item I know some of us have been working with Jeff on, and we do have our representative from Premium Parking here as well. This is a topic I know that's kind of come up and been going on for a long time. So what we've prepared here is an action item for discussion. Some of the background, obviously, we've been dealing with parking on this parking lot here from various businesses for a number of years now. not obviously going away or getting better in that regard. So more recently, we've reached out and met with several different parking management companies, looking at what services they provided, and where we've kind of come to is with Premium Parking. I know, I think you all had a presentation at a recent meeting about it, is that they are a full service company. Every other company that we have met with, talked to so far, can provide the app, can provide the payment mechanism, but when it comes into enforcement, ultimately how are we going to make sure that the rules are followed? Those companies don't have a mechanism for that. It's going to either fall back on our police department or some code enforcement to be, trying to chase people out of the parking lot or get people to pay. So that's where we've kind of worked with Premium Parking, as they have local abilities to have a person staffed locally here to be able to enforce and manage and make sure people comply and educate them on the rules here. So kind of had this time for discussion. I don't know if Jeff wants to say any more on it or not, but we do have a proposal here that we are asking to be able to negotiate forward if that's the council's direction.
Yeah, really, we had a discussion on the last council meeting we had, it's been going on for about a year and a half, where we met with different companies, and we obviously have heavy traffic out in the parking lot here with the businesses across the street and others, and just trying to come to a solution that can be usable, but also maintained in a manner that the staff and the police department is not tasked with doing that.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Allegretto.
Sure, I'll ask just one question. When it reads parking compliance, Premium Parking can provide a full service management platform to include, and then it lists the things. What is parking compliance?
I can answer, but
perhaps
Ben up here, what I say?
May want to answer that? I mean, I have an idea of what I think parking compliance may be.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to see many of you again and some of you for the first time. This conversation goes back over 12 months, but to your question, parking compliance, we refer to it as a culture of compliance, and that it's multifaceted. You really have to have, it starts with good signage, so that's number one. And then you have to have a really easy way. We believe, first off, that most people will do the right thing if you provide an easy way to do it. You show them how it's done, and then you just want to kind of make sure that the others have some sort of repercussion.
Sure.
And that compliance would be, for us in this situation, what we would call an off the windshield ticket, and that money that was paid, that was for the citation, would go back to the city. So we're not incentivized to write tickets. We're more there to educate, but the unpaid parking would go back into the pot. So I might have given you more than you asked there.
No, I don't think you gave me exactly what I asked. Though.
Okay.
Like, parking compliance means somebody comes and parks in the lot.
Sure.
You have a full-time attendant on the site, as it says here. You're leaving a ticket on their window?
Correct. So
what's that ticket for? Like for parking there and they didn't pay, but like, is it a set amount of money? Is it a...
All to be negotiated, all to be set by policy by the city.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're able to still park there, and then it's on us for the enforcement of that money?
We'll do that. So with the ticket, we'll do the follow-up. They'll have a way to pay easily. They'll have a way to appeal. We'll handle the first appeal.
Okay.
And there's a new state law going into effect on July 1st, which gives everyone who is denied that appeal the ability to appeal again to a third party. So that'll go to a third party,
And I do understand that we're talking about a small percentage of the people. I'm sure that you have plenty of stats that you'd be willing to share with us as far as what percent of people would park in a lot like that and not pay.
Right.
But I just really wanted to know what the compliance was, whether it was a boot on my wheel, being towed. I mean, those are all
Sure.
real
Great questions.
compliance. You park at the wrong CVS in Atlanta, you got a boot. Like, it's not a joke. So as long as we're not heavy-handed with compliance, but at the same time, it's also not falling back on our staff or our police department again. to be the ones that handle that. And that's kind of the explanation that I wanted, so
Yes,
I
sir.
do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from council? Mr. Smith?
Kind of reading this proposal, last time you kind of caught me off guard based off of what I had known about premium parking to what you guys were actually proposing to us. Everything I had seen up to this point was license plate reader cameras, you didn't have to employ anybody, you know, cameras got you in, got you out, you paid it. If you didn't, you got a citation in the mail or whatnot. Going with the route that you have with a full-time parking ambassador, compliance agent, whatever it may be, within the proposed contract, I guess I should say, that you guys have over the years, if we decided that, you know, we wanted maybe to not go the route of the compliance officer and switch over to the software running the whole thing, is that something that's feasible?
100%. I think the baseline is to say we desire to be your partner. We have all the solutions. The proposal was there to start a conversation, and as we negotiate, maybe you do want to put LPRs instead, and we're okay with that as well. We just want to have that dialogue with you and see what's best for you.
Okay. Another question. This is more for Jeff. Can you explain to me how, I guess, this would work within the constraints of our deed restrictions and reverter clauses?
It won't have any impact whatsoever because the issue of paid parking can be paid public parking, and that's effectively what's going to be. That reverter clause does not impact parking at all. It doesn't say anything about requiring free parking. The issue of people parking already in the parking lot exists today with or without the paid parking. So y'all can add the paid parking right now. It will not trigger the reverter clause because the issue of people parking exists today, and that's truly the issue that could possibly, I don't think would trigger it, in my opinion, ever just having those cars here, but that's the bigger issue than paid parking, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm right there with Travis. I was, you know, when this first all started coming up and, you know, understanding there's a problem with parking out here because they're coming across there and it's causing parking problems for us or civic events or such things, I could see that being a reason to, you know, restrict or control parking. But then I heard that it was related to the deed issues. So I'm going to probably ask you again, maybe to clarify what he just asked. I'm not sure how I understand that how a problem with the deed related to parking gets fixed by changing it to paid parking.
In my opinion, the current parking issue is not an issue on the deed.
Okay.
The only case on point in Florida is a Florida Supreme Court case that covered the professional tennis center that was built in Miami, Florida. And in that case, they did deem that a reverter clause been triggered, but it's kind of the bright line test. And what happened in that case was that there was a public park, giant park, that they then tore down and built a tennis facility on. They built a huge parking lot in it. And 3 to 4 months out of the year, they would throw these professional tennis tournaments and cut the public off from being able to actually use the parking lot or the tennis center. Florida Supreme Court said because the public could not use the park at all for 3 or 4 months, then that triggered the reverter clause. And they charged for parking and whatnot. That was not the issue there. It was the fact that the public was completely cut off for 3 or 4 months. I don't believe that's the issue y'all have here, even currently with the parking. I believe there's still spots out there, and so that the parking's not even currently totally cut off. So I wouldn't even think the reverter clause would be triggered today. And I don't think a court would decide that. And so the paid parking is really a red herring issue in the context of whether or not you're worried about a reverter clause triggering. Because you can have paid parking, and that's still a public purpose. It's just a revenue driver for the city.
Right, and that's kind of maybe where I was coming, maybe even coming from a little bit deeper, is that this all started off as, hey, it's a problem, they're parking over here. Oh, it's actually a problem with the deed, and now it's not a problem with the deed. It's actually, hey, let's get some paid parking. I mean, that's kind of the way I'm processing it and feeling about it. And it's just a revenue source And so if we're talking about, hey, let's implement and budget for these items that is a revenue source for the city, that's what we'll be voting on, but we're not voting on a fix for a problem with parking related to the deed.
And that's public policy for y'all to decide.
Right,
Y'all
gotcha.
do that.
Okay.
But to analogize, I do know, the parks, certain parks, to rent those out, you have to pay the city a fee, I do believe, a recreational fee, so not everything's always totally free.
Sure. Yeah. Gotcha.
Mr. Mead, go ahead.
But the parking is being used because it was considered public parking for the city. And now we're charging for that public parking for the city.
Correct.
We're not leasing our parking lot out, or we're not giving it away, keeping it for the intended use, which is public parking, city hall, etc.
It's open to anyone who wants to park there, a member of the public. Y'all are not going to actually be saying 90% of this to be used by a certain somebody. It's open to anybody, public. So any member of the public can pay to use the parking lot if y'all adopt it, and any member of the public can use the parking lot here today.
And a more local example was the Meg's Trust with the Shell Courthouse.
Right.
But they built a courthouse annex across town, and then I believe they were sending a judge over 1 or 2 days a week to have a couple of hearings.
One day a month, eventually, I think.
Yeah, so.
My firm represents the trust in that case.
Okay. We represent the other people. But the point is, there's still going to be a city hall here. And there's not just going to be a city council chambers that meets every other or every third month. This is still going to be a city hall, and so that's where I agree as a policy with our legal advice that there may not be any need for any sharing with the trust, because we're using it for public facilities, it's public parking, and we're not stopping this as a city hall.
Right, and I didn't see any mention, I brought it up at the last time because I thought there was some pressure coming from the trust to us about, the reverter clause, and that we might be in violation and that kind of stuff. So I said, well, hey, maybe they'll release it if they get a share or something like that. I don't see that's a part of, there's not a recommendation of that here, right? So from the way I'm processing this is, it's now no longer a fix to a deed reverter issue, which I think is how it kind of got started. One of the two things that got it started. And now we're just talking about an expense and a revenue. So how much is the expense and what's the expected revenue, and what happens if the expense exceeds the revenue? Right? I mean.
So we typically, and this is what we're proposing, there's no expense to the city at all. We upfront all the CapEx, and that includes signage. It would include the LPRs if we did those. So there's really no expense. We would just ask for a revenue share. And again, it's all negotiable. That's just a proposal. So
sure.
If the city if the city manager wanted to do it a different way, we just want to discuss it. Again, I have 80 locations from Bay St. Louis to Panama City, so this is my backyard, if you will, and we're just excited to be able to talk about how to manage your parking and what's best for the city.
We've got the city, and then we have citizens, and we're representatives of the citizens up here. And some of these guys probably get tired of hearing it, but if there's going to be an additional revenue source coming in, and are there any premium parking supply for? Okay, so we don't have. Do you have projections either in here that are there in here?
Yeah, it's like the second page after.
137, 50, 50, so about 70?
66.5.
66.5. I'm not on that page. I'd gone on through it. So 66,500. I'd love to see it be offset to, because one of my goals as a council member, as I've stated, my number one goal is to reduce the cost of government on taxpayers. And so, I would like to see this revenue be offset to taxpayers somehow, but we can talk about that at another time. Thank you.
Other questions from the council? Anyone from the public wish to comment on this?
About the parking?
Yes, sir.
Is that going to be on all public spaces or just in parking lots that the city owns?
This parking lot.
Just this parking lot front of
This
City
is
Hall.
parking lot here. Because we're having issues with maybe people using it that are to support their personal businesses. It's become an issue here.
So it said.
So it's said.
So it said.
Because I know people down on Brook Street who have to provide parking for their businesses in order to be able to have their business. Then there's people on the other side of the street who do not have to provide any parking at all, but they get their business license, so they get to use the street parking, but do not have to provide parking. So the application or a business to operate is not being applied equally. And then they're being judged here because they're taking advantage of something because of the popularity. And then we have other areas over here that don't have to provide any parking at all, and they get to provide all these city streets parking to provide for their business without having to provide any private parking for their customers. So some things aren't being applied regularly throughout our city just because we have an isolated incident here where they're being used, you know. But I've seen these pay for parking coming up quite a bit. In fact, I've even, being a general contractor myself, I was in a meeting in the city of Destin about a project we were doing. And there were going to be 7 people in this meeting to talk about parking on my project. And I said, he introduced me to the parking manager. And I said, man, you guys are really serious. You have a real parking manager. He said, no, sir, I'm the department manager, not just parking manager. But I'm trying to say some things need to be applied equally here, not just looked at in general, because I'm seeing this here being done to manage. And maybe you tell people don't come here because you're going to have to pay. Well, then something's not being applied properly here. It's according to money to be able to provide services for yourself, already putting money into the city through taxes, through a business. But over here, those who can't afford that, the extra so many dollars, then we're saying, well, don't park here. Find another private area or off the street or something, and it gets pushed out to other people then having problems because they don't want to be in the paid parking area. So I think you need to really seriously consider this ramifications and properly being applied equally to all businesses that are having private parking for their city or their business.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the public wish to comment?
Mayor,
Yes.
I would, if you would allow it and entertain it, I know it's a little out of order, if I could ask the representative one more additional question before
Certainly.
we
Certainly.
get a motion made?
Certainly.
Thank you, sir. I think this is probably a very easy answer, and I'm sure it is. In here, I read that, you know, someone that's coming to City Hall for City Hall business, you know, someone that may be elderly and has a check and wants to pay their water bill, or somebody that is here to talk to the building department, or somebody that's come to a city council meeting tonight. If we didn't want them to pay, how does that process work? Would they be given a voucher or a code on their phone? If they don't have a phone, are they able to scan something? Just, you know, I'm sure that you've accounted for that. I even see it in here. And I know that, you know, obviously all this would be negotiated between the city and your business if we authorize the city manager to move forward with it. But if you could kind of explain that process, it would really help inform me on how I plan to vote.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Parking's really simple, but it has infinite nuances, right? So with premium, I'll just begin by saying, without getting too deep in the weeds, we are 100% gateless, which means that we can manage the property down to the stall by the particular signage. So one way to we have 5 or 6 different solutions for that. And I think that's number one priority, is to make sure that the city hall functions the way it normally did. But one way is to simply have a certain area I think we've already discussed, a certain area closest to the building that's not paid. You know, it's just for that type of use with the signage on each of those stalls. But we have others. We have other ways to validate in that without getting too deep in the weeds.
Okay, gotcha.
While you're here, so each stall out there will have a sign in front of it?
So again, infinite nuances. We're not we don't believe in littering a lot with signage, but in the instances where we do need to manage a particular stall or a group of stalls, we could. But the answer is no, we're not planning on signing every stall in the lot. We'll have different envelopes or zones, which will be clearly marked. So, and it doesn't have to be many, it can be just, the paid area, more the city area, if you like. And that's more easily accomplished without the LPR, because the LPR provides kind of like a envelope. So again, infinite nuances, but we can do it a lot of different ways. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, maybe this would be for Jeff, thank you. Maybe for Jeff, and it's just to try to get my crazy mindset out to you guys, because Nick always giggles at me. This is well, I only see him. He's the most obvious with it. I should say that. He's the most obvious with it. So, the 66,500, now, once again, it's not coming from fixing a problem related to the deed, reverter clause. It's not going to trigger that, we believe. So it's just additional revenue from visitors to public parking here. And it says the city could set aside this revenue for uses such as civic auditorium or towards City Hall replacement. But it could also go towards other things, and this is maybe where we'll join together, and that, for example, $20,000 of it, or whatever that number was for Chris's administrative costs over there, we could then take that money from here to pay your hours of that girl that person that's running the program. And I don't remember what that was, 25,000 or thereabouts, I think it was. And we would then have $25,000 more to fund those other underlying causes that we all thought were, worthy, but they just didn't get approved. I know it may cause some problems. I think you said that 15%, but to have another $25,000 in that pot seems good, and not gotten a great reception on giving it directly back to the taxpayers, so maybe some other way. So it's just additional revenue source that I might see it being spent differently, given back to the community differently. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other comments from council? Council, may we get a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I recommend authorization for city staff to negotiate a contract for premium parking for parking services for the City Hall parking lot at 107 Miracle Strip Parkway, and for the revenue to be set aside specifically for civic auditorium improvements for City Hall replacement project. Or I guess the better terminology is any building maintenance or new construction at this property is probably a better way to put it.
Second. I
Moved
concur.
by
From
Councilman.
perspective, that's better. Yes.
Been moved by Councilman Smith, second by Councilman Allegretto, to authorize a negotiation with Premium Parking to provide parking management services for the City Hall parking lot, and for the monies raised through that to be used for City Hall or auditorium maintenance upgrades or replacement. About what you say?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
In the replacement, you're meaning on the property?
On the property.
Yeah. Yes. Any other comments?
I think intent probably is the best way to describe this for me. I know there's questions about deeds and reverters and stuff like that. When you really get down and talk to the family about it, it was the intent and how this property was being used. The intent that the family had for this property to be used for was recreational services on that backfield in City Hall business. That is not how it's currently being used. So I also agree with this gentleman that the parking is kind of all over the place. Some of the reason why you see the parking in downtown for Walton Beach is there's an overlay district in there, and there's different parking requirements over there than there is over here. And I also believe that if the city has an asset and private businesses is profiting off of that asset, that profit should be shared with the city. My business, if I overflow on my parking on all my cars, I can't come bring them down and park them in the City Hall parking lot. I've got about 500 cars on my lot one point in time. About 200 more than I could almost carry. I couldn't come down here and just park them on City Hall's lot as a private business because I ran out of room. So we do have this issue. I would like to use the property with the intent. I also want to give the people some money back. I think the way in doing that is you're wanting an auditorium and a City Hall, which might be a little steep for me. I would like to talk about a City Hall first, but I think putting that money back into these facilities and getting them into, you know, a respectable manner based off of conversations that we've had with the family would do good for the legacy of Liza, according to them. So that's kind of my intent in this motion.
Thank you, sir.
Just like to briefly add that I really appreciate the legal advice of Mr. Burns and Mr. Mead kind of following up on that as well. I think it's a great presentation. Obviously, I've been in parking lots that use this service. It's been very easy for me to use, and I think I have a high level of confidence that it would be easy for someone else. I look forward to seeing the contract that y'all negotiate, which would come back to council, I believe, for final approval, correct? So I have full confidence in it and hope it works out well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else from council? Mr. Mead?
I'll support the motion well, and I agree, I do appreciate your advice. One thing I would appreciate going forward is if perhaps you and our finance director could interact to make sure that the reverter won't affect the issuance of the bond in the event that we build a new city hall. I think if it will, now's the time to get ahead of it. But
we'll look into that.
Okay. Because if it will, then we need to negotiate buying it out. But if it won't, then we'll just continue moving forward. But I think we don't want to get to the point where we're ready to move forward and then start dealing with it. So I'm hoping we can start that ahead of time.
Thank you, sir. Other comments from council?
You already closed all the comments?
Closed. That's closed. Yes, sir.
You already did.
Council, please vote. And it does pass 5-1. Thank you, council. I'll bring us to item 11.2, discussion of photo enforcement in school zones. Chief Page.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Robert Page, Chief of the City of Fort Walton Beach. Back in May 31st, 2023, Governor DeSantis signed House Bill 657 into law, which allowed for photo enforcement in local school zones. This modified section 316.0776 and 334.0324 of the Florida State statutes, which authorize the placement of speed detection devices within school zones. Florida Department of Transportation, I attached a FAQ that they put out, published rules in December of 23 for photo enforcement in school zones. There are several cities and counties across the state that have entered into school zone photo enforcement contracts with various vendors. I know Niceville and Panama City have some interest in the Panhandle area, and I wanted to bring this item in front of the council before we started to work on an ordinance, because the state law requires an enabling local ordinance to enforce the state statute. So I wanted to have some discussion to see if you wanted us to work on the ordinance. There was one company that had done a 3-day sample speed study, and it was attached in the council and staff report. And they showed numerous violations, especially on Racetrack and on Hollywood and on Wright Parkway, for speed in excess of 10 miles over the speed limit. The photo enforcement is allowed to enforce a half hour prior and a half hour after the school day, so it's not just during the beacon times that flash. So it's throughout the school day, and it triggers when you're 10 miles above the speed limit. And I turn it over for any questions or comments.
Thank you, sir. Questions from council for Chief Page? Mr. Smith.
Are you aware of any statistics that we have within the city of Fort Walton Beach of our school zones with anybody getting injured or hurt or killed or anything like that?
For traffic crashes and fatalities, there are traffic, I don't believe there's a fatality, and I have to look for the number of injury-related crashes. There are crashes that go on within the school zones. There was the study that was done by the vendor if you wanted amounts of violations within the areas that they would estimate. Those numbers are included in the staff report, and I can get back with traffic crashes in the school zones.
Mr. Walker?
One of the most frequent complaints I hear is speeding. And it's not school, it's just speeding. It's usually Eglin Parkway and others. So, you know, we're talking about for school zones, why not Eglin Parkway?
Because the state law only allows for photo enforcement in school zones. So in the state of Florida, we can only do photo enforcement speed within school zones. In other states, there is additional photo enforcement, but in Florida, it's only within the school zone. And there would probably be some carryover effect onto the other roadways with the photo enforcement in the school zones.
Thank you.
Other questions for Chief Page from council? Mr. Allegretto?
So in this study, they just did a study based around schools, not necessarily schools that we would even have the jurisdiction to put cameras in those areas.
The sites they picked were, the only one that I have to really look at is the one no, racetrack is within the city. It's because it's between Choctaw and Big Lots.
But isn't it a state road?
No, but that's what the state law allows us to do is photo enforcement anywhere within the city, whether it's
Even
a
on
state road,
roads.
a county road, a local road. So any roadway within the city, we could put up the speed enforcement detection devices.
And so, final question, I believe you mentioned it, but if we were to move forward with this recommendation tonight, what you're looking to do is write an ordinance and then bring that ordinance back to our council for our discussion and approval.
Correct.
And then it would follow the typical process of first reading, second reading, approval. And therefore it would give the community plenty of time to offer us feedback and come here and talk about, or email or call or anything like that.
Correct. We wanted to see direction from the council to see if you wanted us to go down that road with the ordinance drafting. And then there'd be 2 readings of the ordinance. Once the ordinance was passed, then we would go with procurement to determine whether we piggyback, RFP, or how do we establish a vendor. Because this is an automated process, so 90% of it would be done by a third-party vendor. And then an officer here would have to review the final product before the citation was issued if there's a violation detected.
Okay, and I lied, I have one more. How many school zones do we have in the city?
Well, we listed out the big ones because if you look on the study, and I think it's on page 10, it was written kind of light. We looked at Edwards Elementary because that's right there on Wright Parkway and Hollywood, which is a more thorough. We did actually several directions in Edwards, so we looked at Hollywood and we looked at Wright Parkway. We looked at Bruner because Holmes is another roadway that has a fairly good amount of traffic. And then we looked at Choctaw, where we looked at racetracks. So those would be the locations we would consider. You have other elementaries like Elliott Point, but the traffic and the residential characteristic down Elliott Point may not be as numerous as some of the other areas. But part of this program, since it's done at no direct cost to the city, there may be an indirect cost for the officer that has to review the final citation. But the share, very similar to how the parking is done, it comes off a share of each citation that is written. So there's no upfront cost to the city. So if we did want to look at somewhere like Edwards or Elliott Point, we could put something at Elliott Point too.
Right back here behind City Hall?
Correct, you could also look at St. Mary's.
Okay. Right.
So we could expand that out. The company that did this, they did it on their own. They went to the major intersections. But we could expand that to any school zone that we wish to put photo enforcement into.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Anyone from the public wish to comment? Council, may we get a motion?
I move that we approve our police department moving forward with investigating and completing the proposed ordinance for our review and consideration.
Second.
Thank you, sir. Been moved by Councilman Meade, second by Councilman Jeter to allow our police department to go ahead with a draft ordinance for our consideration at a future meeting for photo enforcement in our school zones. Further comment?
I look forward to hearing public input like Mr. Allegretto referenced.
Council, please vote. Does pass unanimously. Thank you, Council. Brings us to item 11.3, code enforcement action. This is a carryover from our earlier workshop. We just need to make a motion and tie up all around activities from the workshop. Mr. Berry.
I make a motion that we reinstate the code enforcement board.
And even though there was adequate public comment at the workshop, just as you're making a motion, I strongly recommend you take public comments on the motion itself too. So.
I'm sorry?
Even though there was adequate public comment at the workshop itself, because the motion is being made now during the meeting, I would just recommend you offer public comment before you vote.
All right. Thank you, sir. We'll keep you straight. Anyone want to speak on code enforcement actions? You may or may not have been at the earlier workshop, but time to speak if you so desire.
Mayor, I believe what you were saying, correct, is if we had a motion and a second.
Correct.
And then we had some discussion.
Then I'll open
up.
up. Yeah, before you vote, just make sure you open up the public comment.
I just wanted to make sure that's what you were saying, because we didn't have a second yet.
Nope.
And I know the motion was just to reinstate, is that correct?
Right.
I think, is it, not for clarification, but I don't think it's been, it still exists. I think they just,
Not utilized.
to start maybe reutilizing, is that your intent, Ms. Mary?
Well, I can restate my motion then to utilize the code enforcement board. Do we even have the people?
I think that'd be the next step after y'all vote. I think I don't even know who the current.
Yeah, utilize the code enforcement board.
Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Been moved by Mr. Berry and seconded by Councilman Walker to reinstate, reinstate the code enforcement board. Further discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, the reason I want to reinstate the code enforcement board, it's nice that we have a magistrate for the big cases, but I want to have the citizens to be able to come to the code enforcement board to discuss their issues. What I'm hearing from many people that have complaints or violators or whatever, they're having difficulty discussing with the code enforcement board and or the magistrate. So my thoughts are, I have been on the LPA board and people have come here and discussed, and they felt more comfortable talking to us rather than being closed in an office just with the magistrate and code enforcement. They didn't feel comfortable. They felt that they had come in and had already made the decision. My thoughts is having them come to people that, such as ourselves here, that are residents, taxpayers, and we represent the citizens, taxpayers of the city, that they feel more comfortable talking to us. Now, they may not always agree with our decision, but at least they have the chance to discuss with their peers.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Walker?
So, right, yeah, it's for clarification, again, I know it's been stated there, but it's not reinstated. It is still actively in use. So really, and it might be a friendly amendment, Mr. Berry, that I'm going to suggest here. We might be going in the same direction. So if it's the council's wishes to direct staff to utilize the board, then we could make that the direction or the motion and see if it passes or whatever else, because I'm with you in that I think that they should be an option, but we also don't want to burden staff. So a compromise may be along the lines of, so I spoke with Ms. Tierney in between, that I thought it might be a good idea that if it's been burdensome on staff to get a quorum, which there's been discussion whether there was or there wasn't, or why they happened or didn't, whatever, but maybe to have a first action would be to schedule a meeting of the board with the resident, as it always has occurred prior to the magistrate. And then if there's not a quorum, it's scheduled for July the 22nd and then that same notice to that recipient, the violator. If there's not a quorum met on, it's set for the 22nd. If not, you'll meet the magistrate on the 26th. I don't know. It's a two-step process where we get to utilize them first. There seems to be a community interest in keeping the board active and being a first stop for them. I understand it creates, the staff says it's not as efficient, so I get that too. But if it can go to them first, the inefficiency was, as I understand it, was there was not a quorum meeting met often enough. So if they don't meet, it goes straight to the magistrate. So that would be clarification, if that's what we're looking for, to give staff about how we would like to still see the board being utilized, not causing problems for staff. So that would be in my intent of supporting this motion.
If you don't mind, just
Yeah.
one thing, and this is going to be a major logistical hurdle.
Is it?
Because, and if y'all do intend on reinstating full-time the code board, I think you need to actually come up with categories of cases that need to go to them, because it's going to be impossible to line up a special magistrate on 4 days' notice. And as put that way, it's not easy to find attorneys who are qualified and willing to be special magistrates. And we were lucky we were able to find the Bowmans, but it was very hard finding a conflict magistrate when we went through and started looking for somebody. And so if you were to do something like that, where it goes to the magistrate if they don't have a quorum of the board, that's going to be so nebulous, and these attorneys do have full calendars typically. Sure. And so just my recommendation would be, if y'all do vote to keep the board, so you have two separate triers of fact for code violations, you need to come up with categories. You need to say, I know there's a recommendation during the workshop for commercial. I would probably recommend that there's a board member, I know it's probably popular, someone out there, if a board member has a code violation, it probably needs to go to the magistrate as well, so the rest of the board doesn't feel compelled to look out for another board member. It'd be a neutral. And so you need to come up with categories, I think, as opposed to saying everything goes to the code board first. That's just my recommendation.
Thank you. And so right now, is the magistrate scheduled on a particular day or days of the week? So maintaining that schedule, second Thursday for whatever it is, right? If it's to not disrupt them, and obviously if they're scheduled for the second Thursday of the month, right? Their schedule's open, they're busy schedules, but I can't do it on the second Thursday because I've got the magistrate possibly. But when did they find out that they don't have a case on that second Thursday? How soon in advance did they find out that they don't have a case?
They've always had cases, because all the cases are going to them. They've met every month since January, and so. Except I think Juneteenth was this month's special magistrate hearing, so they didn't meet this month. But they've had at least 7 or 8 matters.
So the objective then would be not to disrupt their schedule, but to put the board, another option might be to put the board meeting well enough in advance of it so that they still keep that. And if they didn't meet on that Wednesday, the board didn't meet on that Wednesday because there wasn't a quorum, then obviously the magistrate's going to have maybe even a more full case, because maybe everybody doesn't show up at the board, but they do show up at the magistrate, right?
And you're saying if there's no quorum of the board?
If there's no quorum, I mean, it's still there, the magistrate's still keeping their schedule for that day.
If you keep canceling on the magistrates, they're going to quit. That's what I'm getting at. And there's not a lot of attorneys out there willing to do the job. And so this is a consideration you need to have.
Well, and that's interesting because they would only get canceled on if the board wasn't meeting, and the problem has been stated that the board wasn't meeting quorum. So, I know we're paying a magistrate and we're not paying the board. So I hear you, and I know that it could be.
I think it's why there's no local government we're aware of that has both. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to do both, y'all are inventing the wheel here.
Okay.
And so y'all need to think about coming up with categories.
Well, it was us, and who else? Who was the other one? There's
not another one that has a magistrate board. Okaloosa County has a board.
Oh, that's right. Okay, gotcha.
Mr. Jeter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Burns, for summing that up. We were mudding the process earlier, trying to add one letter to it, and I think doing this. So while I understand both you are trying to do, and I do support the community working together, but I think it needs to be on the saying of, the community's on your street already. You know if you're out of code compliance or not, and the community will tell you. So what's the most effective way for you to get code enforced? Magistrate? I think I've asked you this 5 times, it's told me the same answer every time. Magistrate or a board?
For us, it's a magistrate.
Yeah, TDC board almost got canceled this morning because we didn't have quorum, and we had to call somebody in, and it's very frustrating to be there and have that happen. So we're trying to get compliance here. I'm for a magistrate. I don't think I want to support, I get what you're trying to do, and I like it, but I would support a magistrate. I would support a motion for a police to go with you to everyone. I don't think we have the personnel to do that, but I like working parallel with the police department. I like the letter in between the first and second reading so that if someone comes back here again, they don't have the we didn't know. So I definitely would entertain all those kind of motions, but I'm supporting the magistrate to support you. That's the most efficient way to get into compliance, right?
Yes.
And like you said, we have a long list of properties out of compliance.
Mayor.
Mr. Allegretto?
I've really kind of done a 180 on this after listening to everybody have this discussion. You know, I always try to keep an open mind about things I don't know about, and even things I do know about when I come in here and listen to what people have to say. It just makes a lot of sense to have a magistrate, like just plain and simple. That we're paying an expert in that. We're paying someone to make decisions. They know the law. They know, Mr. Rennie, who spoke earlier, who I have a lot of respect for, is a very smart guy. And he said during his time on the code enforcement board, he said, maybe it would be beneficial if we could get, 30 minutes before the meeting, get an education on, the latest changes or anything like that. And that really kind of drove it home to me that, like, that's just not the time for this. Like, these are people with major issues coming before a paid attorney who knows how it's supposed to be and is not going to feel, well, man, I really kind of feel bad for that person, et cetera, et cetera. Like, our code staff works with the community, and our code staff tries to give, as we listed earlier, all of these additional chances and opportunities for compliance. By the time you're here, we're kind of done with that, is how I feel. So if this is the most effective way, as you have said, for us to get this compliance, I'm with you, and I'm not going to support this motion. I'm going to support this magistrate. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Berry?
I have spoken to many of the previous code enforcement board members, stating that the last year or two that they were on the board, they did not always get notice that they were having a meeting. They did not get the agenda that they studied. I'm just sharing with you what I was told, what they explained to me. Whereas with us on council, thank you, Ms. Marks, for sending the agenda ahead of time, that we can research the information, we can go over it and discuss. And I'm just sharing with you what the previous code members have said over the years. And I watched it disintegrate. So, and this is why I'm asking for us to utilize the code enforcement board. I realize that we're using a magistrate that knows the law. Let that person take care of the hard part. But they come to us first here, and if we can't settle it here, then send it on to the magistrate. Or if there's something, especially if it's commercial, big commercial stuff, send it on to the magistrate. So, that's what I really heard from the people is that they felt intimidated going in there by themselves to the code enforcement board and the magistrate.
Mr. Berry, your motion was to reinstate the code enforcement board. Mr. Walker, you offered a friendly amendment to embellish that somewhat.
Yes, sure.
So where are we? Did you accept the friendly amendment?
A friendly amendment?
Well, it was. It's never been uninstated. You said reinstate. It's currently active.
Okay, utilize the code enforcement board. Is that what you're asking me to do?
That works. That'll be fine. I see where this is going. So yes, that'll be good.
Yeah.
All right, so the motion on the floor is to utilize the code enforcement board, made by Mr. Berry, seconded by Councilman Walker. Now, any public comment on this?
You know there is. I'm with Ms. DeBerry. We live in separate sections of the town, and I have canvassed Elliott Point, Ferry Park, and without a doubt, there is not one single person that has wanted the magistrate. They want their colleagues, their neighbors, they want to be able to talk, they want to be less intimidated. And yes, I agree to some degree that perhaps it is more convenient for the city officials, but we all know that government moves very slowly, and so be it. But the community needs to stay involved. The citizens need to feel like there is participation more than one committee, the land planning committee. And this is an opportunity for the city, for the citizens to become involved and feel like that they have a say. And as far as the many years that I was on the Code Enforcement Board prior to this, I think it would be imperative on the City Council's behalf that when you select somebody, because I know of 3 people that want to be on this committee, and it would be imperative and paramount for y'all to impress on the person that you would select for this committee to make them understand this is a quasi-judicial panel. This is an important part of the way the city operates. And I'm gaining even more appreciation for code enforcement after this workshop and after the study I have done on my behalf, because I am a violator. I think it really behooves you to allow us to stay consistent. And I do agree with Jeff that perhaps, as I suggested earlier, that we divide it into commercial, where there are more legal ramifications that could be involved in the decision-making process versus the residential, because all of the board members are homeowners. So we know about our homes, but we may not know all the intricacies of commercial business. And I think that, although I'd like to be arrogant enough to say, oh, I could make a decision, but the reality is I don't know all the ramifications of the pontoon boat, or the jet skis. So I would recommend that we do have a category of commercial versus residential, but please, please, you will really upset the city residents if you do not allow this code enforcement board to continue to operate.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name's Keith Wells. I lived in the city 15 years in Kenwood, and other than many trips down here to pay my water bills, this is my first time in the council meeting, but I'm glad to be here. One suggestion I have is, how about if we use both of those entities? And there's a compelling reason. In Kenwood, where I live, we have a lot of senior residents, right? And sometimes when they pass away, their kids who are taking over their property or having to deal with the disposal of it, they may live up north somewhere, or they may be in the military. So things might not happen real quickly. So the property gets all grown over, right? Or, the car sitting in the driveway with flat tires, something like that. That happens frequently. I've seen it in my own neighborhood. On the other hand, there's obvious cases where there's uses of the property that are completely incongruent with normal standards. Something that might catch the eye of the chief's guys, right? They're doing illegal activities in the house. The guy's running Fred Sanford's operation in his driveway, right? Those type are the things that need the magistrate right away, right? because you need to clamp down on that guy. But in the case of, maybe it's a family having a little challenge in dealing with the situation, the board could really work with that better, I think. You know, if some of those family members could talk with those people, and maybe they have someone that would listen to them. So I would suggest that we come up with a hybrid solution, that we retain the board and also hire the magistrate. The magistrate would make it easier for us to get rid of those clear-cut cases where we have definite violations that need to be dealt with immediately. And on the other hand, the board allows us to deal with the ones that may have more of a personal issue. So all we really need to do is break down those violations into those that fit in the one category versus the other, and then move forward with the plan. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
I've actually had to call code enforcement about issues in my own neighborhood, and they've explained to me how to get more bite by calling over to PAWS, because they have a more ability to be able to put dollar amounts and penalties toward people who are violating code ordinances with their pets. Interestingly enough, I thought that was interesting. But I do believe we need to keep our community board in place, because I can see many attorneys saying I specialize in, you know what I mean, magistrate representation, you know what I mean, there's some more billable hours in that area. And yes, I can see some revenue sharing we can get from that, rather than doing parking lot fees and that to share for the city. Yeah, there could be some dollars amount from that, but I think that I think there does need to be a heavy behind what people are asking to be done to do the right thing. And there is a difference between residential and there is commercial. If it is commercial, first thing I can see is an attorney. If I had a problem with code enforcement, I'd disagree with them. That's who I bring along with me if I'm my expert too. And then let's go ahead and let's go all the way. I mean, it's just how serious you want to get. Because I'll just bring somebody bigger than what I think I'm going to be dealing with. But I think local community boards is the way to deal with community. Okay, and to help us make a more of an issue to it is by recognizing its responsibilities and maybe putting some more teeth in with the local community boards. I do not believe people ought to be driving up and down making notes about who they're going to turn in and who's willing to stand up and use their name because I found someone to write someone up. I don't think that's right. I actually think that it ought to be neighbors working with neighbors, because even code enforcement said to me, Ms. Taylor, have you actually spoken with them yet over there about the problem? You know, and then I find out the reason I couldn't go, they were out of town and other people were helping them with the issues, and they were violating the code for the owner. They didn't realize they had done something wrong. So I think we ought to keep the community board and to keep regular people. If you're not going to attend, then get off the board. Find someone else who will attend. Okay, that's what I think, rather than always going straight to the magistrate. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? All right, seeing none?
Mayor.
Yes.
May I?
Yes, ma'am.
Quick 2 points of clarification. The quorum was not like the major issue or factor. That was only one of the things that's discussed between the staff. You know, my office works closely with the code enforcement office on planning the meetings and everything. So that was just one of the items. That was not the key factor. The second thing is there was an email sent to the board every time before a meeting, some days before, similar to your email that I send you. The agenda is attached to that email, but the only information that can be included is the case number. You can't include the information from staff because that has to be presented at the code board meeting. So you can't have it early in order to study it, because you hear from the city and you hear from the defendants. So that's the agenda information.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. All right, council's back to us. The motion on the floor is to utilize the code enforcement board, period.
Motion second.
Mr. Smith?
I kind of mentally struggle with this. I'm not going to support this specific motion. I do think the more that you can get the community involved, the better off we all are. You know, I think that some of these issues that you guys present, that you talk about are probably, it's easier to say them being solved than them actually being solved, just per se. Let's say the quorum of people not being met. If they're not met, kick them off. I can tell you, since I've been up here, we've never had any more applicants to go on the code board than we've had seats available on the code board. So we can only do so much. We need you guys, you know, and the general public, that if this is what you want, come down here and show us this is what you want. I have no doubt that this board will give it to you. But you know, it's a struggle, because I look at the city. I've lived here my whole life. I've never lived anywhere else. I haven't seen a lot of change as far as I'd say blight and stuff like that. It's probably actually even gotten maybe a little bit worse. So in my mind, we've had this code enforcement code board for this long, and nothing has seemed to get better. Although I will say the last 6 months, you do see things starting to get better. So it lends credence to, you know, the magistrate having some sort of effect. But I also mentally struggle with the fact that I do believe we need citizen input. So as much as I want citizen input, if the citizens aren't willing to step up to the plate, you know, I don't know what to do at that point in time. So right now on this specific motion, I'm not going to support. I don't know where I go from here. You know, the hybrid sounds like a good idea, but it sounds clear as mud in the same sense. So I'm completely lost on this one. I'll tell you that right now. So, but this specific motion, I will not be supporting.
Public comments, come on, we're back to council discussion.
Well, I just
No
want to
ma'am,
respond.
no ma'am, no ma'am, thank you.
Mr.
Get
Mayor.
another council.
Ms. Barnes, just because if it does come back up, Travis, if the community gets together and they come back out here and we reinstitute it after it's been disbanded or whatever the case may be, you mentioned that the quorum was only one of the problems. What were some of the other problems, so we have an idea of what those other problems were?
That's Chris's.
Oh.
On Chris's side.
No, I'll say general, just, you know, when we're going there and presenting these cases, you know, a benefit that we see as staff is that it's not taking the personal opinion into it. It's looking at just the facts of the case. So we try to be reasonable, you know, with these timeframes, and in my experience, you know, listening to our magistrate this year, that as we've gotten into it, you know, if someone comes in and says, hey, yeah, you know, I 30 days isn't enough, I need 45. My experience so far is seeing that they're willing to work with them and give them a reasonable amount of time to comply. I said for staff side, it's just, you know, seeing the administrative fees assessed and seeing the code applied evenly and, you know, same time after time has been the upsides to us.
Sure, and I really appreciate that, because it, you know, that's kind of what we do as a board up here. It brings the human side, not to say that a magistrate's not human, but, you know, I mean, every action I've seen from a magistrate, and there's only been a few of them, it's been very fair. But you know, it's quote, by the books or technicality sometimes even, where it was the one where the magistrate said, well, you can park it around back and that'll solve it. Where, you know, it was amazing that it had to come to the magistrate when that was the solution. I think that had it gone through a first filtering, we might have not even had them come up there and take up the magistrate's time, the money, and the citizens are still involved. And again, back to us as this group up here, we're doing we're humans. And when someone's hurting and they tell us, well, we're sorry, you have to follow it here. What is it we do with their fines and penalties? We reduce them. And I know there's a guideline there that talks about 10%. I remember that chart coming up and look at it. And I think 2 or 3 of the cases, we all just said, we're not paying attention to that. We're going to apply our human side of us being elected representatives, and we're going to issue what we think is fair and just. And so that's kind of where I see that board having a role. And I asked what the other problems other than quorum are, and you said that from what, I mean, I know you didn't say it, but the way I process it, well, they apply human feelings to it, and I like it.
For sure. And I will say, you know, as far as that discussion of whether it's a split of residential and commercial, just to go that route, you know, the majority of the cases that go in front of either board or magistrate are residential cases. Commercial cases, I'll say the majority of them, if they move through to notice of violation, they're getting cleaned up and complied before they go to the board. You know, most of these are, whether it's a property owner or a business, they're getting it straightened up before it ever gets to that stage. So most cases that go in front of them are residential. So if it is to go that route, we probably, you know, I would ask for some clear direction and you know, discussion, and maybe something to continue on to discuss. It's not decided here now, but you know, just something to keep in mind.
Well, as it stands right now, in the last 3, 5, 6 months, whatever, since you operate under the assumption and the practices of just bypassing them. I'm not going to contact them. I prefer the magistrate. I have I have the choice of going to the board, or I can go to the magistrate. I'm going to the magistrate, right?
Yeah, so far it's been 5 meetings. We've had 5 meetings with the magistrate today.
Right. So today, and I know this motion is still a little confusing, because I know we originally started talking about, do we need to fill those positions? We're not talking about this. Are we talking about, if this motion passes, is the board disbanded? See, we might not be getting to a question that, you know, is it going to be disbanded? Is the board going to be disbanded today?
If this motion passes, it's going to stay.
I'm sorry. If this motion doesn't pass is probably is the right way to say it. If this motion doesn't pass, then will the code enforcement board be disbanded? Because that's not the motion.
No.
Okay. It's not being disbanded. Okay.
Y'all have to take a separate action.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, anyone else from council? Mr. Meade?
We have an agreement with our magistrate. We have a contract.
Contract.
City council approved it. We're 6 months into the contract. As a person, I like to be judged by a group of my peers. I agree with everyone. I like that concept. They're dedicated. They've put a lot of work into it. I like that concept. I do know that we have a magistrate that seems to be working as well. So I do know that we've committed to this period. I do know that if we stop utilizing, or I don't know if it would be a breach of the contract, but either.
I don't think it would. I mean, we wouldn't. It's a pretty flexible contract.
Sure, but we've committed for a period of time, and so I've gone back and forth, as other folks here today have. I'm of the opinion that I'm not going to support the motion. Not that I don't support the board. I do support the board. I do want the board, but I do want to see what we've committed to do to its conclusion. I don't want to disband the board. I'd like to see a couple months more roll by, see how it continues to work, and then a few months from now, which unfortunately goes by quicker than I like to think, when this continues to go around, see where we are, see how it works, see if we want to do a hybrid, see if we want to do the board or not the board. But I don't want to change directions from where we are. We seem to be having a direction, so I think we commit to it and see how it works at the end of the year.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from council? Council, please vote.
But that's not what the citizens want.
Oh, I was the secretary.
And it fails 2-4. Thank you, council. Well, let's go to 11.4. This was the ITB number 2410, the artificial park turf, which was removed from the consent agenda.
Mayor, I believe we had a few more items under our workshop. that we
Oh,
discussed,
okay. Do you want to just
if that's
do this?
okay?
Yes, yep, absolutely.
I was on note, Councilman Peter, you were bringing up all those issues about all stuff we talked about increased service process and whatnot. I think we had taken the direction that y'all probably want that added in there into the ordinance. Is that accurate?
My question, and I think the consensus was we like it around the second stage where fines start being imposed, but one of my questions is, can we do it as a practice and not, in addition, do we need to revise the whole code if we, as as a council, say we would like for staff to start doing it. If it's not required, we're just taking this extra step. If that's the case, we could make a motion, but I don't know that we want to change, or do we have to change all of our policies and procedures?
I'm sure
to
staff
start
will listen
doing
to
it?
you, but I guess if they decide not to do it on some cases and do it on some cases, maybe that could create an issue of a defense for, and so I would say staff need to do it and make a commitment to do it in every case.
We would for sure if that's the direction.
Personally, I'd love to see it happen around the second phase when we start imposing fines. I know I would like to benefit if I was someone being accused of violating a city code ordinance. But whether or not we change our code or whether we start implementing it, I would defer to everyone else.
I mean, I'm for that. I don't know that I have the language currently in front of me to craft a motion like that, but that's exactly what I was thinking, and kind of the line of questioning that I was getting at with Mr. Persetti and Mr. Burns was trying to find out where the right place for that is, just so that we can satisfy. Because again, when we're talking about these codes and these cases that come here in front of the council, like we're way off the board with we've gotten all the letters and everything all through this process. As you gentlemen brought up earlier, the widow or widower who passes away and they're the final one living in the home, and their son or daughter is out of town. We want to make sure that everything the city does on behalf of its residents is the right thing, right? We want to make every effort to contact those people. Sometimes you're just not going to be able to get a hold of them right away, but our staff has a very good track record, in my opinion, of working with those people to say, like, hey, we're going to find somebody, we're going to knock on the neighbor's door, we're going to make some phone calls, we're going to send some emails. So changing anything at the very other end of this spectrum doesn't change that, in my opinion at least. But I do agree that if we could add another guardrail to this equation to say, hey, we've also now served notice as well, as long as somebody could craft that motion with the correct language so that we could put it together, I'd be all in favor.
I move that we direct staff to bring back a proposed ordinance to City Council 60 days from today, where you interact with our city attorneys to provide an additional or enhanced service to the alleged code violators on or before the second hearing, which would effectuate some sort of personal service. It could be in compliance with the Florida Rules of Civil Procedure or whatever methodology the attorney and the staff bring to the council.
So that was your motion, Mr. Mead, and Mr. Allegretto, you seconded it? Okay. And Ms. Barnes, are you clear on that? Direct staff?
It'll be on recording.
It'll be on recording, all right.
Don't try to repeat that one.
All right. All right, to provide enhanced service to the code violators prior to the second hearing is what I wrote down. Any further discussion on that? Mr. Smith?
I just want to say that I think this is a good thing. Kind of a couple of the instances where Mr. Walker was talking about earlier, where the people have come in and asked for further fine reduction. We did do that because, the burden of proof is on the city at the end of the day to prove that we did our job. And I think in those instances, we couldn't beyond a reasonable doubt prove that we did everything the way that we were supposed to do. I think with this, we'll be able to do that, and it'll take away the excuse of I didn't know, I didn't get it, because that's what everybody says when they come in here. And I think it just kind of makes everything more clear for the resident, more clear for staff, and more clear for us. And the more we can do that, the better off we're going to be.
Thanks, Mr. Walker.
I agree, and Chris, I really appreciate that flow chart in there, and because I was racking my brain about how it happened, but the flow chart goes, certified mail, did they receive it? No, there is a path of all no's on certified mails, and then the solution to that was to post notice on the property. It's like, well, we know she lives in Texas. But that was the process that's in place, was that you go and post it. Because the one lady over here, I forget which street it was on, pretty close by over here, that I think she actually ended up tearing the house down or everything. But, I'm sorry?
Tupelo.
It might have been Tupelo, I think, yeah, Chicago, Tupelo, I can't remember, but it's right around in there, but I think, I mean, she was close to losing her house. I mean, it was close to being gone, wasn't it? I mean, had she not shown up here, I think there was, then one of the next steps would have been to take the property, because it wasn't homesteaded.
For sure.
Wasn't homesteaded, so, you know, that's that critical step in that process of service, personal service. She's out in Texas. We know it, but we've sent certified mail. She didn't receive it. Sent certified mail. She didn't receive it. Well, we're about to take her house. I don't know what's happening out there in Texas. Maybe she didn't, maybe she's in a home now. Don't know. So I just really like that measure. So thank you for putting that flow chart. And it'll be nice to see, and that before that second one there, that it's personal process.
So you are aware, y'all would have authorized them to then file actual civil suit in circuit court for a foreclosure action. That was what we all were being asked to on that day. If y'all, they would have been required to serve her the process.
Right.
So she would have gotten.
She would have gotten it, but she would have been there.
Yeah. She would have been in court. It was easier for them to come in front of you.
Right.
But they were still working with the guardrails.
Sure. No, that makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah, I think she, just for the record, I think she actually lives on Moriarty. So,
Oh, where? Yeah.
so,
I think a brother was from Texas, and then we had one that zoomed in with us from somewhere up north, or what. There's been quite a few that.
And
they
yeah,
just
at the end
seem-
of the day, that's where they do come to the council, you know, to be able to say, hey, if there's fines that have gone through that process, you guys can take that human element and apply it, you know, to the situation.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from council? Mr. Berry?
Yeah, I still want to emphasize the human element, the board, or code enforcement board, LPA board. What I'm hearing, and I'm out there, there's so many people that have no idea what's going on in city council. I even say, hey, I am not one of these electronic people, but you can watch it live stream. You can audio it or listen to it if you want to. And I'm talking to them. They're coming to me and asking me questions. And I said, hey, I don't have the answer right now, but let me work on it and I'll get back to you. And that's why I am here. That's why I worked hard. I was out there for 10 or more years where you guys are out there and coming to the board or coming to the dais and getting knocked down and knocked down and knocked down. And I kept coming until I got the answers. And this is what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for the people out there. I'm fighting for our taxpayers, our residents. I want us to work together. I don't want them to feel intimidated about going to a magistrate. I want them to come talk to us and let us work with them. I know it's easier to have a magistrate there, get them in there and get them out. Get them in there and get them out. But I'm here representing the people that put me here. And I'm asking all of you guys to think the same way. I hear what you're saying. I hear what you said, that the magistrates are taking over and getting rid of the code enforcement board. I came to the code enforcement board years ago, and I came to some of their meetings, and I watched and I listened, and I learned so much. And I see that we're losing touch. And this is what I'm asking the board here to reconsider, or even think about it a little bit more, and let's see how we go. We have a contract with the magistrate for another however many months, I don't know. And I would like us to reconsider and think about bringing our code enforcement board back. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Anyone else on council? Mr. Neary, this is another motion. You get a chance to speak.
Well, Mr. Mead, I think you're showing favoritism to your colleagues, and I think that's unfair. You're bringing your legal knowledge to the council as opposed to the citizens that put you here. And I really think anybody who votes against this, and I'm unclear, let me have clarification from you, because you said you want to keep things the way they are. Well, the way they are right now, if you look at the calendar of the city, the magistrate is scheduled for the rest of the year.
Hey, Mayor and Mr. Neri, this motion, I believe, is to add an additional notification for a defendant that we're to be in front of whether
it's for
it be...
comments, though.
No, right, but let me let you know, you're commenting on a motion that is about if you were way down the line in the process and you are now appearing in front of a code enforcement board or a magistrate, you can have all the time you like if you comment on what we're talking about. But what we're talking about is service to another level. We're talking about a process service to notify somebody if you were in violation. We're talking about beefing up that process.
Well, I
Nothing to do
understand.
with magistrates or code enforcement board.
Well, but having served on the board, which perhaps none of you have, I don't know, but I need clarification for me to ask what you're directing as to what Mr. Mead was saying. Is it to stay the way it is, which is to keep?
No, ma'am.
We're not, yeah,
No, we're not there.
Okay, well, but it does, because when you go from order 1 to order 2, then you're asking for another level to be in there, is that correct?
No, we're just trying to give you another way that we could make sure that you knew what was happening against you. Like if this were going on with you and you didn't know, you didn't get the certified mail, now we're going to send actual, like, someone to serve notice. Hey, Mr. Neri, maybe you didn't get these certified letters, maybe you didn't get the initial mail. We're trying to make sure that we do it
and see,
all
I
the way
don't
around.
understand the need for that, because having been, it's up to the code officer. When he comes before the board, he has to present all the letters that were sent. You know, so as the board member, we know exactly how many times the city has tried to contact the owner. So when they come before the board and say, we never got that, then we automatically ask them, you know, how many, you know, letters have you rejected? Or how many times have you gotten notice? And Bert, the one I usually deal with is Bert. He has it all laid out right there. So there's no need to have another layer and pay somebody, in my estimation, and pay somebody else, because they've documented everything. They've done their job. And when they come before us, like somebody said, that we're not, Kim said, we're not allowed to have the information before. We only get the case numbers, because we're not allowed to go out and see what the situation is. The onus is on the officer to present all the pictures, to give us all the information, and we make a decision just as fast as any magistrate can. It's just a matter of, is there a quorum? And like Mr. Roberts said, or whoever that was, that, you know, we respond fairly quickly. We don't have a problem with a quorum. And as far as the citizens, when I've asked them if they would like to be on the board, I've gotten, like I said, I've got 3 people who want to be on the board, but the city doesn't have a really great communication to the public. And so they don't know what boards are available. But like the young, Karen, that's why I'm learning, but she wants to be on the board. I have 3 other people that I know would like to be on the code. So I don't think of getting more layers in the process is the issue. But I would like to ask, are you saying that you want to keep everything the way it is, which the magistrate is scheduled through the rest of the year? Which means, you know, you're saying that hasn't changed or has changed in 6 months. Well, we haven't met for 6 months. So how can you compare apples and oranges when there's no apples in the orange bin?
Mr. Neri, first of all, time's up. Second of all,
Well,
the
I
ordinance.
have some questions answered, Mr. Mayor.
I did take some of your time there.
The motion on the floor is to direct staff to prepare an ordinance to provide enhanced service to the code violators before the second hearing. That's all we're talking about right now. And you've used your time, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Mr. Neri, I've always taken your calls, and I'd be more than happy to chat on the phone tomorrow.
Well, I'm just trying to get clarification to what somebody's saying.
And I'll be very happy to do that at your convenience.
Well, don't you think that ought to be part of the record? Well, like he said, he took some of my time, so, you know.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. Council, please vote.
Wow. Wow.
Did I second that? Who seconded that? I'll give it to it.
See, I giggle.
Yeah, that's passed 6-0. Thank you, council.
Giggle.
All right, have we exhausted our discussion on code enforcement actions from the workshop?
For tonight.
We have one more, go ahead. Mayor, we also discussed our police chief's concept of being able to enforce some of his remedies as well as code enforcement remedies simultaneously. Not that they have to be both utilized, but I think it was the consensus of the group that we would like for the police chief to bring back in a month or two, whatever the appropriate time would be, the ability for the city to implement a new code for the enforcement through the police side. Specifically, we discussed, as an example, with the Liberty vessels, citing employees, owners, customers, operators. Just, I'm hoping that they can give us their suggestions for a future ordinance.
And so you just want the police chief to bring his concepts back to us?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
In conjunction, of course, with the rest of the city staff and the attorney as well, I would assume. And, you know, I know that you're going to be kind of limited in what you can do. But at the same time, I think what we had discussed earlier was, it seemed very attractive to try to make it as unattractive as possible to do that, to run that illegal type of business. So if there's something that you can come up with that, you know, would be in a code, would be in a, however you could put that together. If not, and obviously even still, in the meantime, we'd still love all the enforcement efforts that you and your department can make.
Mayor, most of that is already in place. The civil citation code was passed a year or two ago by the city council. So it can be done. It's just a change in the workflow. And it's just the will of the city council, and the city manager, if we want to go on parallel tracks and do both civil citations, either from the police department or code, because we both can write civil citations while we run a notice case parallel. There wouldn't really be much that would have to be changed in the code. The only changes would be that if you went to what Councilman Smith talked about with citing individual violators on the pontoons or something that's outside of the existing code, that would have to come back. But currently, any city code can be cited in the parallel process. And there are cities that will start a notice case, and when they go back for reinspection for like order 1, order 2, they will issue a civil citation at that time if there's another violation that's still ongoing. So it's not out of the realm. It's something that we could do now. We don't really have to wait 60 or 90 days for. We could start a civil citation notice process for various violations as we identify them.
I would just say the only big issue when you look at is the customers, like how far y'all can push that.
And that's the only thing that would have to be changed.
Yeah.
But for the existing codes that are currently on the books, we can write them right now. We can do a citation for no markings. They can start a notice case for no markings. We could do a citation for prohibited use by renting them out from a single-family residential structure. Code could also issue a notice case for that same violation. So that parallel path could be done right now in existing codes.
We like that.
So you don't need council direction to do that. You can, you're good to do that right now. All right, thank you.
We're talking about employees, operators,
Right.
customers, everybody on board.
Yeah.
That's where we have to go and design new code. So we have to work with the city attorney and code enforcement to draft new code. But for existing code, we could run parallel processes right now.
Thank you.
Council, are we good?
John, do you think, or does anyone think that we should make that into a motion to bring that back? As a
I would recommend for the protection, just in the future, staff and Chief Page, y'all make a motion on it, set direction, so that it's in the minutes that y'all agreed to authorize the dual process.
I move that we authorize a dual process of code enforcement with giving staff the direction to allow the civil fines to run simultaneous to the code fines when necessary.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilman Meade and seconded by Councilman Jeter to authorize the dual process with the police working in parallel with code enforcement. What's the rest of that sentence? To work in parallel?
For code enforcement.
For code enforcement, yep. Okay, got it. Further comment? Further comment? Anyone from the city, from the audience? Council, please vote. Does pass 6-0. Thank you, Council. Now, are there any other actions that we need to talk about on the code enforcement workshop? All right, if we completed that, let's go to 11.4. ITB 24-010, the artificial park turf taken from the consent agenda.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, with my question there early on, Jeff, about that lease, I'd like to go through this as quickly as possible, and I think I would make a motion that we postpone this approval until we've all had a chance to review the lease. And I'd also request that the council get any and all leases that were presented from the first one to the final one. I'd like to just see that process through and see get a picture of that. So I'd like to just postpone this to a next meeting to approve this, because we don't have a lease in place right now. It'd be bad business to commit ourselves to this without having that lease.
Yeah, we'll verify the bids are valid for that time period.
Okay.
If not, that's fine.
Thank you.
Anyone else from council want to discuss this? Right.
Are you okay with that, Jeff? I mean, it's not gonna delay anything, postpone
yeah,
anything?
because we actually would need to bring back that lease agreement back anyway. They're supposed to give me some final approval this week, so it would have to come back to council anyway, and we'll bring it back the same day.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of the cart before the horse. I just don't want to slow anything down because they're both going to happen. Okay.
And one other thing too, thanks for the pause there. So, you know, when it was leased, and the design, still like the designs that was there originally, probably not going to be as expensive coverings, I guess. But, you know, I guess that was kind of my initial thought on this, and now it's different that I learned that the lease wasn't finalized, so I just said, let's do that. But, you know, so it was a $100,000 lease or thereabouts. We've got turf and we've got other things. So, do we have a full projected, what are the picnic tables, the electric, the water? I don't know what all's going to go there.
I believe the lease was around $1,100 a month, I believe, and then this would be $104. I would say probably a project total of roughly $150.
Gotcha. So, well, it's...
I mean, we would do some of the concrete stuff in-house, so actual hiring contractors. So it would be under $200,000 that we would spend on the whole project.
But we don't, I don't know what the plans are for it yet. We saw some renderings, which I really liked. I really liked the shade and all that kind of stuff there. But now to hear today that we initially on that other project thought 10,000 would be right, and it turns out it's going to be more like 40.
Yeah, well, when we bring the lease back to you,
now the lease, is it gonna address the leasehold improvements? I mean, are you talking about the shades, the concrete, the grass? Because
we'll have cost estimates for everything at the next meeting.
so it'd be like a final project out to the finish. Here's what it'll look like, and here's the total cost. Because right now we're only in it for the lease commitment that's almost done, and that was $100,000 for 5 years. Is that? I mean, $20,000 a year or thereabouts.
Probably $14,000 a year.
Was it? I thought it was 100 for
I'll
5.
verify.
I thought it was 100 for 5, but whatever it is. And then I saw that number, and then I'm like, okay, what else?
We'll have a complete project list to you, the lease agreement, and a complete project list to you with costs and everything at the next time, and a rendering.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So that's going to be put off till the next meeting. So we're at item 12, city manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor. Just future, obviously we don't meet in July. We'll work diligently to get the budget and everything back to council. We've got August the 12th a workshop schedule, which is a Monday, August the 12th at 4 p.m. And we've got that day scheduled until we finish. It could be, that'll be a long one because we go through the whole budget. My recommendation would be to meet on that 12th, and then we don't have a lot of agenda items at all for the which there would be a meeting on the next day. My recommendation would be to have a regular council meeting on the 27th of August. So we have the budget workshop meeting on the 12th, and then we would follow that up with an August 27th meeting. That works for everybody.
Gotcha. All right.
And by then we will have the renderings, everything.
All right. Thank you very much. Jeff?
No, nothing tonight. So.
All right. Thank you. And we thank you for sitting in tonight. We really appreciate
No
that.
problem.
Thank you very much. And back to final comments. Well, where did I start last time? I started with Mr. Smith.
None for me, Mayor.
Mr. Walker?
We need to talk, Jeff, about the rec center policy. It's been going, on for a while. We have just a little background on it. We have a service member, Major Oser, citizen, property owner in the city, owns a adult athletic league. It is in comparison to the for the Emerald Coast Social Sports, and we've had an exchange. Previously there was no written policy on the website regarding what you provided us recently, so now there is one. It's written there, and so looking at it and just digesting it and seeing how all it might affect Major Oser, and just digging in through all sorts of things, whether it's the code of ordinance or other such things. I want to talk more about the policy, and the email you sent to me, I get it. You mentioned, you start off that you had contacted Mr. Bay 12 or 13 years ago. I'm going to back up just a little bit. It's internally in me that Major Oser, whether it was by intent or not, just by happenstance, it appears to me as though he's being treated differently. And through your written policy, you confirmed he's being treated differently because you prioritized Emerald Coast Social Sports. You contacted Mr. Bay 12 or 13 years ago, and you went on and explained, a little bit more. But how long have you known Mr. Bay?
Maybe 2008.
Okay.
I don't know.
I forgot his glasses. So you've known him quite a while, and I'm asking you, I know these will feel personal, but it's just the appearance of that Major Oser and or other citizens might feel that someone's getting special treatment that happens to be friends with you. I mean, are you friends? Would you say you're friends with Mr. Bay?
I would say I reached out to him because he coached in our Little League sports, and I reached out to him. Walker Kickball called me in 2012 and said, hey, we want to run a kickball league that gets sponsors out in the community, and do you have somebody to do it? So I reached out to him and said, would you be interested in doing this? We need somebody to boost our adult sports for our recreation department. He said, I'll give it a shot. So we ran it for 2 years. It registered to the City of Fort Walton Beach Recreation Department. After a year or two, he came in and said, hey, I'd like to add some other sports. Started Emerald Coast Social Sports to give back to the community, the recreation department, the city, the community, coach, officiate leagues, you name it, and has been doing so for the last 12 years. Carl Oster came in, and I met with an attorney of theirs last year and said, hey, we can work with them. We have other fields. We actually met with Kim Kopp, and I and the recreation staff met with him, had a good meeting. He's currently playing Thursdays and Friday nights at the rec center on volleyball courts. He's been given every opportunity to come sit down with Wendy, get on the calendar, schedule anything they want to do, and left the meeting good, and he hasn't been in there to schedule any dates. ECSS submits a year's worth of calendar dates a year in advance of their dates, and they both can coincide at the same time. I don't know what the issue is. He hasn't been in there they play Thursday and Friday nights.
Well,
long as they want.
I've met with him a couple of times myself, and he has, a little bit different of opinions about some of the things you stay there, but that's okay. We can both leave the same meeting and have different concepts of what actually took place there, and he does. But so I asked, do you consider yourself friends with Mr. Bay?
Is this a trial?
No, it's just a question. Really.
It's just very,
Well, I mean, I'm friends with a lot of people, Councilman.
And Mr. Walker,
Yes, sir.
I just want to remind you, you can't give the city manager a specific direction. If you need him to do something, you can make a motion, and if the council decides that's something they want to do, that's fine.
Sure.
But you're not allowed to give him specific direction.
And I have not given him specific
Well, that's
direction.
the direction it seemed to be going, that's all I'm just
No,
saying.
I have a completely different direction I'm going. So it's not to give him specific instructions. What I'm trying to point out here is that he feels, a person that I represent, a city resident, that he's been treated differently, and he believes that it's because you have a special relationship with him, and I'm trying to determine if that's, and you don't have to answer it. I think not answering it is an answer too. I'm fine with that. But when you prioritize, as you did, you wrote it and you said it, it's on the webpage, he has been prioritized, that person, that entity, who is not a resident of the city, right? He does not live in the city, is that correct?
His house is not in the city limits.
Oh, okay, so he's not a city resident, he's someone outside of it. And then when I look at the email as well, in one of the meetings prior, several of the meetings prior, some terminology came up, and I didn't like it then, and it was pay to play. And so you start thinking about pay to play. What does that look like? What does that feel like? And what might it be? And I know you don't intend it this way. It just could be perceived that way. But when you talk about what got him the prioritization, which means he goes ahead of others, is that he volunteers, he sponsors teams, officiates games, provides labor when needed, and has done this for 12 years. So it's like, well, if you do these things for me, us, the city, not you personally, when you do these things for the city, we will prioritize you. But Mr. Oster asked at that meeting, from what he said, I don't know, I wasn't present. I've asked a couple of times in emails to provide me, how does one become a prioritized or a preferred business partner? He's asked to, I think city partner is the terminology that was used in there, to become a city partner. How does one become a city partner?
We told him in the meeting.
Well,
and I would encourage you, you've talked to Carl Oster multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't called me one time on this. I get emails and we talk in a council meeting. I would love to sit in a room and explain how the whole city, the operations have worked the last 12 years, but you haven't done that. I would encourage you to, I'll meet you anywhere, anytime, any place for as long as you want to do it, I'll do it.
Well, good. Tonight.
But you won't do it.
I'm doing it right now.
This is not the time or place, sir.
You're taking a lot of other people's time. Can y'all do it separately, not in here?
And then
Not
come
really,
back and
not when
report
it,
the results.
hold on a
You met
second.
with him and you're reporting the results here to us, Mr. Oster. right?
Yes, I have.
And you're reporting
As a
those
concerned,
results.
as a concerned citizen that came to me asking for my input and my
I understand. that, man. You said
representation.
it 100 times, like 3 different meetings, 4 different meetings now, 15 different emails. What we're asking you to do is meet with the city manager and have that meeting, and then come back here and tell us the results of that meeting.
Well, what if we have a different of opinions of what happened at that meeting?
I don't know. I mean, you can come in here and talk about it, I guess.
Well, Jeff, to fairness to Jeff, he said that the meeting went great, and Mr. Oster did not agree that it went great. He does not know how to become a city partner today.
And I'll say this, I'm tasked with running the operations of the city and to make sure that the department directors are doing that as well, and that they follow out the operations that I set forward. And I've done that. The policy has been posted. As I told you in emails, I've talked with the city of Destin. I actually talked with the recreation director last night from the city of Destin. They do things manually too. They've got the same type of software we do. I've talked to the recreation director, the city of Panama City. I talk to people all over the place. Everybody has a little bit different variations of rental policy, But it's the operations of the city manager to do that, and I've done that, and it's been posted.
So, like I sent you the link to the Destin website, you can go to the Destin website, which Major Oser has been asking for, is to see what times are available so that he could make his plans. He can't do that here in the city of Fort Walton Beach. In Destin, you can.
You can't.
I'm sorry?
You cannot do that with the city of Destin.
You can't do what?
They take the reservations manually.
But the calendar's available on what days are
They can
available.
look at what parks they have available. They cannot reserve anything without calling and reserving it. And it's providing customer service to the people, so you know everything that you're going to get. When the sprinklers are coming on, when the lights are coming on, when the gates are locked, how many people are going to be out there, how long are you going to be out there? And you do things like that, number one, to provide customer service, but also to make sure you don't double book things. So we do all of those things, and the city of Destin does everything manually as well. We've got over 100 sites that we reserve. You take each 10 fields just at the complex, each different pavilion, each pickleball court, everything we have, we've got over 100 sites. You physically cannot put that on a website for somebody to go in and reserve a field from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. It would take us months and months and months to operate that. It's better to say, what facilities do you have? Oh, they got 12 pickleball courts over here. It says on there, pick up the phone. Hey, can I reserve a pickleball court? Actually, absolutely. What day would you like?
So he can call down there. He doesn't have to go meet down there, because I think in the email it was go meet with him.
He can send an email, he can text, he can call, he can go down there and sit down. We had an hour and a half meeting with him here at City Hall.
So back to the prioritization, because that's really the legal side of things that I was looking at on when you prioritize one. I sent also the state statutes on actions that a municipality or a county may take that favors one business entity over the other and how that exposes. So that guys, that's where I'm talking about. If there are, this one alone, if it is determined that this policy was discriminatory or showed favoritism or denied another business owner and there's a legal action from it, we do have a say in it. Especially, I mean, they may not agree with me, but we have a say in, I believe that policy exposes us to legal ramifications. I have a right and ability to say that, right? And I can point it out. I'm on the record as saying I think that's the case. If Major Oser decides to take action and pursues a claim, and we've done nothing, I've pointed it out. I believe that the policy that's in place right now that has been established to this one entity does discriminate against Major Oser. That's my personal opinion. I've stated it tonight, so I'll let you guys go. I see you're not interested in any further discussion, but I appreciate it, and that's my take on it. And I will follow up with Mr. Oser, and I do appreciate your offer to come meet with you. But as I've said from the beginning, I've never once met with you down here at the office before a meeting. I like to have conversations in the public so that everyone sees my thoughts, my concerns, yours as well. Everybody's. We're out here in the public. I don't meet separately.
I understand that, but I would like the opportunity to explain to you, because you get one side of the story. You don't give me the opportunity to give my side of the story, or anybody else that works in the city, and I would just appreciate that opportunity to do that.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Allegretto.
No, sir.
Mr. Berry.
Yes, I'd like to say thank you to Ms. Kimberly Ball,
Yes.
the librarian. She worked with Elder Services to get Tai Chi in there. And let me tell you, the first meeting, we had almost 40 people in that little room. And as it progressed, they just finished up their 8-10 weeks. And I got very favorable comments about that. Now she's going to bring back balance through Elder Services, and I've had several people say thank you, thank you, thank you. I've worked with Janice Van Landingham to get another chair yoga there on Thursday mornings, and they said thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I really appreciate that, and we have full classes Monday through Friday on that one. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jeter.
Thank you, Chief Bache. I feel like some stuff we did tonight is really what we've been trying to work towards for many, many months, and I look forward to meeting the new Quad C officer that's going to be heavily involved in all this kind of stuff. So hope everybody has a happy, safe, and 4th of July, and we will see everybody in August, right? August 12th.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Meade.
Nothing further this evening.
All right. And it's been a long night, so let's go home.
I should say, we didn't have